So the culture here, the concept of this whole program is how do we care for our own? And I think this is a fundamental issue now that euthanasia is legal. And you'll see that immediately when I get into why people actually ask for euthanasia. I consider this to be a culture of abandonment that we're living in. And in this culture of abandonment is associated with assisted death. And this can be changed. We can change the culture around us by caring for others. And so if you're in a community group, whether it be a parish, whether it be whether it be something in your own community that you have a group of seniors together, we can be involved with caring for others and making a difference in our culture. Because it's essential that people who feel that their life lacks value, purpose, or meaning, that they feel that someone cares for them and they're offered purpose, they're offered support and genuine hope through a significant community. The answer is to care for others as they journey through difficult times of their life. So there was a recent study done at Copenhagen University. I believe this was a 2020 study. And it looked at the question of the health of people after they had a stroke. And what they found is that women who described themselves as lonely were 3 times more likely to die within the year, so after a heart attack. So women who described themselves as lonely were 3 times more likely to die within a year after a heart attack than those with an active social life who did not consider themselves lonely. And in the case of men, they were twice as likely to die within the year. Now, some of this is sort of understandable because when you're lonely, you're less likely to stay active, you become often depressed, and you can see how that would affect your health after a heart attack. But also patients who were lonely were 3 times more likely to be anxious, depressed, and reported a lower quality of life. Survey of 1,896 seniors in the UK, more than 1 in 5, so 22% said that they have a conversation with no more than 3 people over the span of an entire week. 22% say they have a conversation with no more than 3 people over the span of an entire week. A quarter of older adults said that it makes them feel good when someone smiles or acknowledges them while waiting in line at places like the bank or grocery store. And 1 in 5 would be just thrilled if someone just stopped to ask them how their day had gone or was going. According to US Census Bureau, this was actually the census from 2020. According to the US Census Bureau, 12.5 million older adults live in a 1-person household, representing 28% of people over the age of 65. The National Poll on Healthy Aging done by the American for retired persons found that 1 in 3 senior citizens are lonely. Research shows that chronic loneliness impacts an older person's memory, physical well-being, mental health, life expectancy, and the authors wrote in the report that more than 1/3 of the seniors in the poll said they felt a lack of companionship. Almost 30% said they socialize with friends, family, or neighbors once a week or less. Yeah, I don't want to eat it. I know, that's fine. Was everybody not able to hear me, or is it fine?
Louder. Some people can't.
Need it louder, okay, it'll be turned up. Why do people ask for euthanasia? And I think this is the essential question that we're actually facing, because the issue is not that I can, because the law doesn't give me an ability to prevent euthanasia. I don't have an ability to stop someone from having MAID. But the essential question is, why are they asking for this? See, because we're told that euthanasia is based on pain and physical suffering, psychological suffering. But the data suggests that very few people are actually asking for euthanasia for those reasons, for suffering. You see the latest data that came out of the federal government, that just came out of Health Canada, very late. It shows you that the top 3 reasons for asking for euthanasia were not about pain and suffering. Okay. That is better. I'm going to talk, I think it's louder now, so that's good. There are some people who are radical autonomous, meaning that, they want control over everything. Yeah, it's good. It's I think, a bit too loud because it's going to squeak at us. And there are some people, they're going to demand those lethal drugs. It's my body, my choice, right? But they're not the majority. They're not the majority at all. They're the ones you saw in the newspapers who are getting their 15 minutes of fame or 10 minutes of fame. Yeah. Most people ask for death because they are in a difficult time of their life. They're feeling lonely, depressed, whether it be physical or psychological suffering that they're experiencing in a sense, right? Because they're going through physical health conditions or psychological health conditions. They're feeling socially isolated. They've lost hope, meaning, and purpose. Hope, meaning, and purpose. It's okay, Kathy's shorter than me. So euthanasia threatens my life. Human experience tells us that it's normal for a person who's experiencing serious illness or personal difficulties and loneliness, that they also fear for their future. They question their purpose for living. They experience existential distress or situational depression, and they lose hope. So, and when we look at the issue of suffering alone, there's a lot of people who are suffering alone. Loneliness, isolation, depression, loss of hope and purpose. These are leading reasons why people are asking for euthanasia. So if you look at it, yes, they might be being approved for euthanasia, or they might have, let's say they have some chronic condition or some future terminal condition. They're asking for euthanasia. Well, they're being approved for it. They're thinking about it because of their medical condition, but they're actually wanting it because they feel their life lacks meaning, purpose, or value. They feel that their life has no reason to continue. Okay. But these are all feelings we all experience. These are all normal to us. There's nothing new about these feelings, these realities. There's nothing new about this. In fact, the concept of suicidal ideation has always been. The only difference now is that if you express those feelings, it could cause your death, meaning it could be taken as a request for euthanasia. By visiting and journeying with and being with others and caring for others, we are affirming a person's purpose for living. Now remember, we're not trying to be psychologists or psychiatrists. We're just trying to be what? A friend. We're trying to be a caring person in one's life. We reduce their loneliness and isolation. We help them find a way through depression and isolation, and we allay their fear of suffering. Because God created us to be with others. That's how we are. I look at this modern world and I say, the world actually has turned the human person upside down. Because we're meant to be with others. We're created to be with others. We're happy in relationship. But the world tells us we're individuals. We can do everything on our own. You know, it's taught us to be hyper individuals. But that, you see, that's not how we tick. That's not what makes us human. What makes us human is being with others and caring for others, our family, our friends, our community, our church community, if that's what we're involved in, etc. Essentially, being with others is how we are made to be. And I always say to people, if this isn't, this is a group sponsored by the Archdiocese of Vancouver. But if this were just some secular group, I'd say, well, if you don't believe in God, well, then you've evolved to be an interconnected being. And that's just how you are. It's the nature of you, okay? Interconnectedness is essential to the human person. Yet today's world has more loneliness than ever before. So you can see how the problem is, especially now that we're talking about, now that euthanasia is legal, how someone might feel this lack of purpose or meaning in their life or continuing their life. And then you have their loneliness combined with that. It's really a deadly mix, if you think about it. Being with others, you can make a difference in their life. You can help them, protect them from euthanasia. And this is what the Compassion Community Care training is all about. You were created, it's to help people experience their difficult health conditions by being with others. So we have this training program that you're being offered today. It helps to train you on the basics of visiting. This is not a major philosophical program. You're going to see that this is really a program that's hands-on. It is. There's no new wheel that was created with this program. It was looking to find effective wheels that are turning already and how they work. This training helps you. It gives you the tools to visit people and to be with others. We can change the world one person at a time. We can protect people by caring. We're all affected by the legalization of euthanasia because we are human. When you say, oh, I was shocked, so-and-so who I knew was approved for MAID. How could that be? How could that have happened? How could they have asked for this? They're a human being going through a difficult time in their life. Cultural loneliness is a serious problem. It affects our health, it affects our quality of life, and it can be a threat to our life. And as I say, why is it a threat to our life? Because if you expressed, as I say again, if you express this feeling of, I don't feel the purpose for my life continuing, let's say you're going through a significant health problem, and you express that to your physician or nurse, that could be taken as a request for MAID. And then the whole questioning begins. the whole process begins. And before you know it, you're walking down that road. So the Compassionate Community Care Training Session is to create a renewed effort to be with and to care for our own. And that's the basic information about it.
Thank you, everyone. So my name is Kathy Machuzzi Acosta. I'm the Director of Compassionate Community Care. We are a registered charity located out of London, Ontario, but we service all across Canada. And so we work closely with various groups like yourselves, and those are online, to help with both a free and confidential helpline. And so this is a business card size that we have. We also can let anyone here have some. Those who are online, you can order them. And these actually save lives. So the reason I say this is we've had numerous calls to our helpline. And again, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We get really busy around the holidays, as I'm sure you can know why. And people from librarians to people who work in the service industry, suicide prevention lines, will actually give out this information. We receive numerous calls from individuals in distress or in crises because of their loved one seeking to be euthanized, or they feel they're coerced to being euthanized. And they can get on the phone, call us, and we'll help them. And ultimately, we'll do whatever it takes. So I just want to encourage you all to definitely take a card, because you don't think you'll use it, but there's that one call, maybe once a year or however many that you may come across. We also have magnets, which are really handy because you can just stick it on your fridge and you don't even think about it. And then when you happen to have that opportunity to share the information, just go and look at it. So thank you. Okay, so we'll begin. Thank you so much to Michelle and to the Archdiocese for having us today and hosting this wonderful opportunity to share this important information with you all. So as we progress, and the first point I want to raise here is in your booklets, you'll see our philosophy. And so I will address with you today our human needs, visiting advice, why we visit. Alex will go over the My Story Matters, why does it matter? And then I'll come back with communicating with persons with disabilities. And then Alex will conclude with advocacy at the doctor's office, elder abuse, and other problems. Okay, and we'll open up for questions at the end as well. So why do we visit? This is a vital part and component of why we're here. We want to encourage you, each of you sitting here in your chairs, and those who are online, to continue to visit if you are already doing that. But if you haven't stepped outside that and haven't had the opportunity to engage in visiting, we want to encourage you to do so, because this is a time, it's critical. We just got a call, like we said, that someone is out there and not here today because they're out visiting and speaking to someone who's at risk. Moments are crucial, and it matters to be involved. It matters to be in the presence of one another. So very important here is to actually be with one another. That's why we call the program Being With. It's very simple. You know, back not too long ago, people would go across the street, they would go next door to their neighbors, and they would visit with them. I live just outside of Toronto, where we have a family and children, and we had beautiful neighbors beside us that we would go out and speak to on a regular basis. You know, every day they knew us, you know. Just sadly, this past summer, they both passed away. First, the male, who's 95, and then his wife, who's 93, within 3 weeks. But it was a wonderful way for us to remain in contact with them. You know, in the summer months, we would help them with their gardening. We'd share our harvest with them. And in the winter months, we would go across and we'd actually shovel their snow. So it was a wonderful way to help and be involved in the community. They never felt alone. They knew that we were there. And so it's important to address this because there is a lack of companionship that's happening in our culture today. And we saw it over COVID, and we definitely continue to see in certain places and pockets where people are alone at home or in nursing homes where they feel isolated. Just gonna move this up. So why do we visit? Well, because by sitting with someone, being with them, you are reducing the loneliness. You're reducing the isolation. You're taking that away. What does that do? It helps prevent depression and despair. Because as people become isolated, they start to grow into that mindset, right? We saw with Alex. But you reduce that. You take that away. You take away that fear. And it's very important because you're watching for signs as well. When you're going out into the community, you're visiting with people, we're going to give you all the tools. So you're going to come out of here and you'll know out of this training, exactly what to look out for. If you happen to see it, you'll know and you'll see the signs. But if there are ever any signs of abuse or neglect, you will be able to know that and distinguish it between what is normal and what is not normal. And you'll know how to prevent it and stop it. Visiting also helps you to provide a sense of belonging and value to the person you're visiting. And why? Because you're creating a community of, you're enveloping that person in your life, you're a part of their life, and you're a regular member of them, and they know they're part of a community. So it's important because it creates a sense of belonging. What are our human needs? So it's important to look at our human needs because we see there's 4 primary human needs. And these are important to note because they affect all of us. So on the human level, regardless of your age, culture, background, we all have these certain needs, okay? And they vary depending on your capacity, ability, interests, hobbies, obviously, and your physical and mental abilities. But ultimately, they come down to 4 areas, which are physical, mental, social, and spiritual. And all of these are like pegs in a wheel. So there's 4 pegs, and if you reduce one, what will happen to the wheel? It'll collapse, right? So similarly, if you don't address each of these 4 needs in a person, especially when you're visiting with, you're being with one another, they will have a lag there. There'll be a lack of that, and that needs to be filled. So it's up to us to do that. And it's really wonderful to know this and be aware of this in advance so that when you do intervene, you actually happen to be in a person's life and you know that they're not really being too physical or they're not having those social needs met or maybe the spiritual side is lagging, you can come and help fill that gap, okay? So under the physical needs, we see that there are oftentimes things like exercise, nutrition, hydration, and sleep. These are key. Obviously, exercise is important. If you don't, my favorite motto is if you don't use it, you lose it, right? And that's often the case with walking, right? With being mobile, with being agile, being able to be flexible, you need to use those muscles, you need to stretch. Obviously, if a person is not able to do certain things, then you will not require them to push that limit. But if they are able to walk, if they prefer walking, and if they are avid joggers or walkers, feel free to go out and participate in those activities with people. Encourage them with what they like and enjoy. I'm not a runner, but I know Alex is. So he goes out in the mornings and he does his runs, and that's fantastic. I'll walk. So in terms of nutrition, this is really important because oftentimes people don't realize how necessary it is to make a healthy diet and make sure you're balanced, you have all the right key nutrients. Oftentimes people might be lagging in a certain vitamin. We saw, especially in the winter months, vitamin D is a big issue for many people. We need to raise that, go outside, get some sun, take a supplement, whatever it is that person may need. So keeping those things in mind. Hydration. Why is it important? Because that affects our bodies. For example, if someone has an adequate level of hydration in their body, then when they take medications, the dosages match up. But unfortunately, we see this that at a certain at a certain age, as people age, there's less water in their bodies. And for the elderly, medications that dissolve in water require lower dosages because they remain highly concentrated in the body. So seniors who have maybe particularly more fat maybe in their bodies, and especially over COVID, we saw that, oftentimes people put on weight, right, during COVID. Medicines that dissolve in fat, therefore, accumulate. So medicines remain longer in their bodies because the kidneys and the liver do not necessarily work as efficiently. And for these reasons, seniors may require lower dosages of medicines. All these facts account to why people have maybe perhaps more side effects from medicine than any other age group. So it's very important. When someone's dehydrated and they work out or they go outside and do something more strenuous than what they're used to, they have signs almost of stress, and it's a distress potentially for their bodies. So it's important to be hydrated properly. Also, for people who are older, 65 years and up, 90% take at least 1 drug per week. For more than 40%, they take at least 5 different drugs per week. And then up to 12% take 10 or more drugs per week. So the stats continue going up. as you get older. So it's important to know how people react to medications, especially if they happen to be admitted into a hospital or a new facility and they're getting new medications assigned to them. How will those medications interact with their existing medications, right? Are there any contraindications? Meaning, will they affect each other perhaps negatively? So those are things to keep in mind as well. Okay, when we talk about the mental needs, our brains require stimulation to stay healthy. What does that mean? Well, that means just like a muscle that you work out in your body, your legs, your arms, your brain is a muscle and you need to stimulate it, right? So what are some ways to stimulate a person's brain? Well, you give them problems, new situations to solve. Our brains require this stimulation to keep healthy and flexible. The brain acts like a muscle. It's more of a muscle than an organ. And activities that simultaneously engage all your senses, such as gardening, walking, playing a physical instrument, musical instruments, walking, those are things that are very important because they engage the brain. Also reading. If a person's not able to maybe see as well and have a difficulty with vision, you can offer to read to them, right? And that's a great way to encourage the visits and as well and then stimulate that person. You can also do puzzles together. You could watch a show or a movie. You could read a book. There's so many different ways. And all these ways act to help a person with overcoming any of the mental needs they have. One serious issue is depression, especially for seniors. We saw that with the stats that Alex brought up. And with depression, it acts as there are people have 4 times more likely to have alcohol-related problems than those who are not depressed. So it is a big risk factor for alcohol, obviously, and substance abuse. The Canadian Coalition for Seniors Mental Health estimates that 80 to 90% of residents in long-term care have had some form of mental disorder and that depression is present in approximately 50% of residents. That's a huge statistic. And what is depression? It's characterized by sadness, feelings of decreased appetite, inability to sleep, so insomnia, loss of interest in hobbies. Some people who are institutionalized and those with medical illness have the highest instances of depression, which can be as high as 70% following a stroke. So it's important to remember this. Elderly patients who are more prone to psychosis than younger persons with depression, and psychosis is a severe mental disorder in which thought and emotions are so impaired that contact is lost with external reality. So it's important to remember this because again, the depression then affects a person's mental state to the extent that if it goes continued and undiagnosed or untreated, it can lead to committing or ideas of suicidal ideation. And that is a big issue. And we see that studies have found that the elderly population frequently consult medical services, usually a primary care physician, shortly before a suicidal act, sometimes in the last few days or hours prior to their suicide. Many caregivers appear to have a lack of sensitivity regarding seniors who have mental health problems. So it's important to understand this quickly, how your role actually plays a pivotal, vital, critical role in the life of others. Dementia is a progressive impairment of memory and other areas of cognition, which results in an eventual reduced ability to care for oneself. It can develop in younger people, but that is often rare. With people who are over the age of 65, it affects 1 in 20 people. And for people over 80, the number rises to 1 in 6. And many people with dementia refuse needed care, and their children are uneasy with becoming caregivers. So we see this oftentimes. We actually had a neighbor who lived on the opposite side of the couple that passed away this summer, and it was their brother. So they shared a house. It was a semi-detached, and they shared the wall. And that brother, thankfully he lived right beside them because he wouldn't go far, but he actually had dementia as well, leading to the end of his life. And oftentimes we'd see sometimes he'd wander around and he'd walk into the backyard, which is safe because it's all fenced in, and sometimes I would see him because there's only 2 homes over, and he'd come over and talk because there was no barrier between him and his brother's fence. There's no fence. And, we often understood this, that sometimes he had certain illusions or, a delusional state, but we always encouraged him to come back and speak to his brother, and find his footing. But the important part was that he was in a supportive community. And now obviously, eventually he ended up going into a nursing home where he had 24-hour care. But there were moments where we understood that this was happening, we need to intervene. So it's important to understand at what point is a person able to stay independent and when they are actually needing some extra assistance and support. Dementia is a serious problem for many people as they get older. So it's important to be understanding of the situation and how it can affect their life. And there's more information about that in your booklets too. In terms of the third social need, we see social is a very strong risk factor for many people. This actually can affect you by early death. And the actual effect it has is almost equal to that of someone actually having smoking and smoking multiple cigarettes a day. This is it's a huge risk factor. Social needs are very important. And when someone feels isolated, especially, it will determine how it impacts their physical, their mental, their spiritual side as well. Oftentimes we hear that people, they may feel that they're getting lonelier because they lose their spouse. And that effect we'll actually see because older women are more likely to be widowed than older men. So it is a big factor on women especially. 1 in 5 Canadians age 65 or older indicated that they felt lonely some of the time or often. And those who are over 85 25% felt lonely some of the time or often. And then as they get older, it increases, right? So living alone, having health problems, a disability, or sensory impairment such as hearing loss, and major events such as the loss of a spouse will all have an effect on a person. So what does social isolation do? Well, what that means is with certain things like having a small social network or being unmarried or participating in few activities with others has been associated with an increased risk of dementia and cognitive decline. So this plays a whole role and it goes full circle and affects all the other areas of the human person in their needs. Most seniors feel connected to their family, but they fear being a burden to them. And so I want to encourage you because they don't want to, affect their family or their loved ones with their own troubles, worries, or hardships. They may be reluctant to talk about these issues, especially about the meaning of life or life after death. So instead, they prefer to talk about their fears or worries. And unfortunately, seniors often lack close relationships to do this. So already this becomes a hindrance and it becomes a lack of communicating for them. So that's why being a friend is so important. Exactly what Alex says. Being there, being with them is important. A key note here I wanted to address is the word tired or tiredness. You may hear that, and I often hear that too, even with my own elderly parents. With them, I think they're physically tired, but sometimes I wonder. It's important to note this because an elderly person says they are tired. It may not mean physical tiredness. Expressing the term tiredness was associated with the need to talk to others about fears and worries. So just to keep that in mind, it is an important way to address a need to talk about fears and worries. And so as you develop close relationships with those who you visit and you be with, you will notice that this is an important factor to bring up and address that. Now, with social isolation, we had COVID, and oftentimes people were separated or they couldn't communicate or necessarily see one another. So we encourage you to look at other ways to communicate with people. So if you happen to be visiting and they're not feeling well or you're not feeling well that day, you need to reschedule a visit, feel free to join on Skype. Or if you have another Zoom or something like that, like an online tool that you can connect still with them, or just simply give them a call and say, why don't we talk on the phone today, reschedule our in-person for next week when both you or I, whoever feels better, okay? And it's important because there's so many ways that you can adapt and you can use technology now. You can still remain connected, but you may not necessarily be in person. So important to bring that up and raise that need. Also, I just want to address this too. If you have someone in your life that feels that they need to communicate more often, just to increase the frequency, because communication is key. Oftentimes people don't know what you are asking of them. So communicating their needs and your needs are so important here. Finally, we want to address spiritual needs. Spiritual needs involve your relationship with God. And so it means both how comfortable you are with yourself and how much you trust yourself and how you forgive yourself are all found in this fourth need. It's intrinsically a private journey. However, it can be shared with others. Spiritual needs can be met in church through inspirational readings, meditation, or walks in nature. It's also very quite based on the individual. Also, it can have a lot of cultural context to it. So a person's way of praying, a person's way of being faithful or religious or spiritual can vary depending on the culture as well. Research has shown that patients with life-threatening or chronic disease regard their spirituality as a beneficial source for coping strategies. It's important to make a note here because sometimes people prefer saying things like religious versus spiritual. And just knowing the way that people address it makes a big impact in terms of how they view their own spirituality. They may actually recognize or prefer or are skeptical of using one versus the other. And so recognizing that is important. Also, some people prefer to use the term believing instead of religious because they may have distanced themselves from the church as an institution. And many seniors have a desire to attend a religious ceremony, but they're not able to. So physically, that's becomes an issue for them. So I encourage you to share with them if there's an opportunity to attend a service or religious opportunity to go ahead and do that. Invite them out. See if you can help manage that and offer that to happen. It's also important to note here that spiritual needs can and often do recognize the need for healing and for forgiving. So if you need assistance with this, and we found this case recently, we had a lady call us and she said that her good close friend has signed up to be euthanized by the end of this month. So we stepped in and asked her, well, where is she now? What's her issue? What's going on with her life? And she said, well, she's worried because she's losing her apartment and she's also been declared diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. So this happened, and a woman that was the only one that called us about this case happened to be her friend. If she hadn't called us, kind of used that number, we wouldn't have been aware of it, but she was desperate because she didn't know what to say. Well, we said there's 4 needs. There's various needs. So the physical, you can help her. We can help her by referring her to a pain management specialist because she was worried about the pain she might experience or suffering because she witnessed the tragic death of a relative not too long ago. So we got her in touch with an actual person in the community that could help her. We also looked after her spiritual needs, finding out what preference she had and if she needed some support in speaking to someone to direct her in that. We also offered to speak to her directly and offer her also mental health support because oftentimes people will find that's a lagging need. And then finally, socially, we encourage her to go in pairs. If she feels she's able to do the first meeting on her own, wonderful. If she's not, we'll come and help her. Or we can ask someone that she's more comfortable to join her on these meetings so she doesn't feel alone. Because for this woman, she thought, this is it. I might as well. And the case is, once you create a significant community around people, they change their mind. The next call I received was just a few days later, and the woman said that the same lady who thought and was so eager to sign off like this and was approved, said that she put euthanasia on the shelf. So she changed her mind. So your presence, your involvement, your interjection is so critical. Existential needs, reflecting on one's previous life experiences. So when you have these existential crises, sometimes people fall away from their faith or their belief system because they find they lose the sense of themselves, or they've done something that they can't forgive themselves or someone else for. So it's important also to address that. That's a bit of an unlayering process, but you'll see as you talk to people and you dialogue, sometimes that will uncover itself. Sometimes you may need to go deeper with a conversation. But to talk to someone about the meaning of life or suffering will actually uncover that and address it. And also talking about the possibility of life after death is so key here. And that's why when people speak, we encourage you to consult with others too, spiritual people that you know, or, a guide, a pastor, a priest, whichever the person is preferring, okay? And finally, the need for inner peace is important. Why? This is a desire to dwell in quietness, peace, beauty, and this may include talking to others about any fears and worries. And it's important because ultimately at the end of life, especially if the person is at the end of life, they need to address those fears because peace in their heart, in their soul is so critical. They also may have a need for giving, and that's a desire to pass on one's experiences of life to the next generation, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it's the idea of generativity, which is to be assured that one's life has meaning, value, and purpose. And it's a basic need. It's fulfilled by using the My Story program, which is why we're here. And so you'll find this is a wonderful way. It's a great tool and it's an asset. And if you need more copies ever in the future, physical, you can email or call us and we'll send them to you. Finally, life satisfaction is important because you have intrinsic, which is your life in general and the health. You also have social, which is friendships, family life, external, which is where you live or work. And you also have the prospective, which is the future financial security issues. So having one's mental, physical, social, and spiritual needs means resulting in a person being at peace with themselves and with the world. So it's so critical to address all those areas. And another little key point here, many seniors will, when questioned, they regard the term need as too strong. So if you want to, I encourage you to say the word wish. What are your wishes? What do you wish for? And that can bring a person in a soft way to come and answer these questions. So we're going to jump over to our next chapter, which is chapter 2 in your books. And those online, it's on page 7. And so we're going to discuss a little bit about visiting advice. And this is my favorite topic because it's practical. You're going to go in, you're going to meet with people. And again, we encourage you, if you haven't started any visiting program before, start with your own community. Just like Alex mentioned in the presentation at the beginning, start with caring for our own. If there's a member of your family, okay, or your immediate circle that you haven't reached out to in a while, go ahead and give them a call. Start off slow. See where they're at. How's life treating them? How are they feeling? Expand from there. There was a woman who took our course in this training, and she was so eager to begin. She actually went ahead, and as she finished this training, she went into her building, which was a high-rise apartments building. And she noticed that between the hours of 4 and 6 every day, there was a lot of people that would come back home. They come back from work or shopping, whatever visits. And so she would sit in her lobby in her apartment building and just wait for people. And as people would come back home, she'd talk to them, hey, how's your day? How are you doing? I noticed you went shopping, anything good out there? So she encourages them to talk to her. And that developed and evolved into her doing home visits. So if you don't have a community you want to talk to, come to your own, and it's so beautiful. We had someone else who posted a little ad in their bulletin in their parish, another person who went to their pastor and said, I want to start a visiting group. It's so easy. If they don't have the words or they're not sure of how to go about it, contact us. We help them, walk them through it. We're more than happy to meet with them, speak to them on the phone, in person or online, and have a meeting and share how important this is, because there are people who need visits in their community. And if you have a solid group in your own parish, you can start a group already there, which is fantastic. So with COVID, as you know, there was a lot of people who maybe had visited before, but then they had to stop temporarily. So we want to encourage you to come back to those ministries if you have them already, or if you have that kind of work underway. And sometimes you may need to address in that community, if it's an institution, facility, or nursing home, what are their protocols? Do they have any certain requirements? I suggest people wash their hands, use hand sanitizer. If there's any kind of form of PPE that they require, just be aware of that. And definitely before you visit, make an assessment of how you feel. So if you're feeling under the weather, maybe you want to reschedule that day, that visit, okay, once you have it. Or just make sure you're, understanding of the person, ask them when they're free next, and they can join you in person another time. And again, reconnect with them over the phone and say, do you prefer on the phone? Maybe we could talk today instead of in person, since I don't feel the greatest. If you feel like you are, uncomfortable still and going out and being closer with other people, you can stay a little bit distant in terms of, stay a couple feet away. And that's important too, because, it makes that person feel comfortable as well. There can be sometimes hesitancy for people to be closely engaged. So we want to encourage them and be comfortable for both parties, okay? We definitely encourage you to wash your hands or sanitize before and after visiting. It's a nice, I have young children, so when I get a visitor come into our home, it's always nice to see if someone washes their hands right off the bat, because we have little ones and they will touch and eat everything. And again, reschedule visits if you're uncomfortable. Be prepared. Ask questions in advance to see what is required for any type of facility that you are visiting if you are going into a facility. All right, visiting advice. So thinking of this, we're just going over to review before you go, when you arrive, communication, nonverbal communication, emotions, conversation tips, ending the visit and after the visit. And starting off before you go, this is the point here, which is you may require a criminal background check. This is great if you've started in a new ministry that's starting or a group that's a visiting group, and it's easy to get. So you just simply go speak to first your pastor or priest, ask them if they have the forms already. If they do, you can ask him for a copy, fill it in, have them submit it for you. Usually there may be a fee, they may cover it. If not, and they ask you to cover it, and that's an issue, feel free to reach out to us. We don't want finances to become an issue for anyone and prevent them from visiting. So please definitely reach out and we'll cover that for you, okay? Also, because you're visiting with seniors, they're considered a vulnerable community. So you may be asked to do a vulnerable sector check, which is just an added, fuller, comprehensive review. And it's part of the criminal background check, so you just need to do that one. And oftentimes, if you are asked to do it yourself, you would just simply go to the police station and ask, because you want to volunteer, you're going to be a visitor, to do a vulnerable sector check. And they will do that for you, okay? And they'll administer it. Usually takes about 1 to 2 weeks. And if you're, depending on the province and the jurisdiction, it can vary anywhere between $20 to $40 roughly on average. So again, if cost is ever a factor, please reach out to us. All of our contact information is here and we'll make sure we take care of you. So when you do get that criminal background check and you're able to receive that, now you're able to say you have the check, it's done, it's complete. And so, you're part of a ministry, you're part of a team, you're part of a group, or you're an individual. Obviously, if you have friends or family that you would like to visit with, you don't need all of that, okay? So just to be aware of, you don't necessarily need those things if you're going to be visiting in communities that you already established yourself and you're a friend to. If you are going out, just make sure you're dressed appropriately. So for this type of fall weather, I would recommend layers, because I obviously was not prepared coming out here. We went up north and we had some visits and meetings, and I found that I should have layered up more. And I encourage you to do the same. If a person wants to go for a walk and it's a nice day, you don't want to prevent that by not being appropriately or ready. So I encourage you to be ready wherever you go. I am happy that I'm able to be here and access the outdoors, but it definitely will prevent someone if they're not ready. In terms of when you are visiting and you're speaking, making sure you arrange your visits. So if you happen to be with someone and they prefer to be indoors in their homebody, that's great. Let's plan around that. So you can bring articles with you. You can bring a journal, you can bring a notepad, pen, paper. And that way you can actually signal to them what you want to do, and you can speak and you can kind of make a plan about it, right? Arranging the visit is important based on what they like. Also, plan what you like. What do you like to do? Are they more visual people? Do they want to read? Do they want to listen to music? Do they want to do a puzzle? So those are all great ideas for you to look at. In terms of when you arrive in person, you want to be able to show the care, of course, and concern. If they're worried about that or any kind of illness, to have hand hygiene, which is washing your hands, that's important. You starting the visit, you can, if you're going into a room where there are shared accommodations with 2 people in one room, you just want to introduce yourself. And why it's important, because when you come into a room, you knock on the door, that person may not necessarily be able to see you. And if they have a visual disability, then they may not know who you are. So you can introduce yourself. Also, it's a benefit because if they have a roommate in the same room, you can actually say, oh, I'm Kathy, I'm here from Compassionate Community Care, and I would love to meet with Steve for a visit. And then they'll start wondering, oh, who's Kathy? What's compassionate community care? They might call and ask for a visit, right? So it's a great way to introduce yourself and encourage that type of work and ministry as well. We also say maybe not to wear rings necessarily, except for a simple wedding band. Jewelry can scratch delicate hands. Also, if you want to address a person with respect, we often refer to Mr. Mrs. before you address them otherwise. And approach the person from the front. Coming from behind can startle people. And if you're introducing yourself, just say who you are so that people know. And of course, if there's a nursing desk or an administrative office, they know that you're coming as well. And if a person has their television on, it might be loud. So just maybe ask to turn it down or put the radio down. And then of course, when you're leaving, ask if they want it turned back up again, right? It's nice to create a very soft, very peaceful environment. So sometimes I find I've been in visits where you come in and there's something blaring, right? So just politely ask if you can lower that. If a person is has a wheelchair and uses a wheelchair, you can sit in a chair beside the person, never sit on their bed or put your personal items on their beds. That's just something, unless they tell you to do that. And if the person is hard of hearing, sit close to them without intruding on their personal space. And it's important to keep that in mind. Just be a little bit relatively distant in the first little while, especially until they become more comfortable with you. And during the visit, of course, you want to be attentive, sensitive, kind, and comforting, and knowing that you're there for them ultimately. And we'll share with you a little bit more tips on that. Communication, it's important to show your caring attitude. So they'll see it and they'll know what you want to intend to do by your actions more than just your words. So if you are with them and you're speaking, tell them what you're going to do before you do it. Always ask for permission first. Communicating is very important, so language matters. Always use person first language. So for example, instead of saying a disabled person, you would say person with a disability, right? It's common sense, most people know that, but it's a good reminder to have. Also, if you have a person who has a child with autism, then you say that versus autistic child. Or an individual with epilepsy versus an epileptic. And, or wheelchair, a person who uses a wheelchair versus wheelchair bound, right? So there's just a difference in how you address it. It's always person first. Treat people the way you would want to be treated, obviously. Always ask first. Being polite means asking for permission before you do something. And obviously people may have different preferences. So being polite, being a good listener, and so it's always a universal rule to be kind. And so if you're speaking and you're asking them for something, give them time to respond, this is important. You want to respect their time and their presence. So giving them an opportunity to speak up, which is really key here in part of visiting, is really important. Also being polite and cheerful and being alert and aware of what's happening in their surroundings. People may have personal boundaries, so just being aware of that as well when you're in their space is very key here. And some people may use gestures to communicate. So it's important, you can ask them if you are understanding the gesture properly or if they are understanding you. I also recommend to bring a journal or notepad so you can write things out if you need to, because sometimes a person may not understand. So it's nice to have that visual reminder to show them what you're referring to. If for nonverbal communication, if you're speaking to someone, it's very important to listen. And so sometimes a lot is not said. And so we wait for that space for person to open up. And, I know it's nice to just rush through things and say, oh, I'm here, let's interview you, let's start the book. But that's not the case. We want you to start slowly and be able to engage and be sympathetic. Facial expressions. So it's often the first thing that a person notices is your face. And so when you have show fear, sadness, or anger, or impatience, that can be quickly revealed and affect the message conveyed during a conversation. So it's important about how you feel and show how you feel about what they're saying. So when they're speaking to you, how do you react? That's something really key and important to keep in mind. Also touch. Some people don't ever have an opportunity to have a visit, much more they may not even have an opportunity to have physical touch. So we recommend you warm up your hands, and if you feel they're open to it, and if you, obviously wash your hands and they're warm, you don't want to scratch them, so you don't have any jewelry on, you can actually reach out and hold their hands. That's a beautiful way to show you care if they're comfortable. Maybe not on the first visit, but as you get to know them, right? And it's very touching. It's clearly a show of care and sympathy and compassion. And it is beautiful. Obviously, respect the wish of those who don't want to be touched. But if they're open to it and they're receptive, then maybe that's a great way to do that. Also, voice. Be sensitive to the feelings behind the words that they are speaking. Respond with your intonation. So your voice, says a lot, but you're also, the way you speak means a lot to people. In terms of eye contact, if someone's avoiding eye contact, that may reveal that a person is uncomfortable with the conversation. So that might be a topic to think or consider to avoid, just to keep in mind. Your eye contact also reveals that you're interested in what they're saying. So if you can keep your eyes on them and show them that you're interested, obviously we don't want to be distracted with the phone or looking at a clock or something happening outside. You want to be directed towards them the whole time. And obviously body movements are important. We want to show that you're, focused on them. This might be a little standoffish for some people, but if that's how you're comfortable, that's who you are, then that's fine. But just to keep that in mind, that it might relay this feeling of uncomfortable or, being a little bit more apprehensive. If someone has a certain appearance, sometimes appearance may reveal the person feels about themselves. If a person looks unkempt, it is one thing, but there could be signs of also abuse or neglect. If a person continuously looks a certain way, or if they used to be a person who really cared about their appearance, but after they've gone into a home or some type of community residence, they're not longer maintaining that standard. So it's important to keep that in mind because it could mean a sign of something else as well. And in terms of space, respecting the personal space is important. Obviously, be aware of their culture, social status, prejudices, and the history of physical abuse may all be factors affecting one's need for personal space. So it's important to be sensitive not only to the body language and the nonverbal cues of others, but also of your own. Okay. In terms of emotions, we need to recognize that a person might be anxious or discouraged or frustrated. So sometimes they might be unhappy in that moment for whatever reason, doesn't reflect on you, okay? So just don't take it personally. Some people have bad days. Don't take their unhappiness as a reflection of you being there. It just means that maybe something happened right before you arrived that affected them negatively. When a person is angry or complaining, let them voice their frustrations. It's a good opportunity for them to let out and vent what they need to say. And so reflecting back to them what they have said, oh, so you feel frustrated that this person didn't address your needs. I understand. So you're validating it. And you want to be sensitive too to the pain, any physical, emotional pain or spiritual pain that a person may have. It's really key and important. Also be aware of their current or past illnesses if you know of them. For example, a person who suffered a stroke may become emotional. And this is something just to understand. A stroke victim, a person who has gone through that may actually have a sense of emotions that come out, and it's just wells up inside. So if you witness that, be aware of it, that you can help them just by letting them allow those emotions out. And also, if you need extra support, reach out to the person that's there, if there is a support person there. And you want to validate them, right? Their feelings, though you may not agree with them, you can say, I understand how you may feel. And so we're not there to visit and argue, so just be sympathetic with a person, especially if they have differing opinions on things than you do. In terms of tips for conversation, use statements. So clear statements like, have you had a chance to go outside today? Would you like some tea? Would you like to go for a walk? Use statements to kind of show how you care and how you want to stimulate conversation. Be conscious of memory issues. So if a person has a memory issue, you want to engage them and make sure that you involve them with things like pictures or their albums. You can bring out things that you see in their personal space and see how you can address it so that they would be eager to share with you about their life and their personal histories. Also encourage them, obviously, to speak about their past. You're going to have the workbook with you, which is a wonderful asset, but feel free to peruse and see what they want to offer you first. in terms of their own space and their memories. And of course, by sharing their memories, they're going to talk about themselves and they'll talk about the important people in their life. And so everyone has a story, and it's important to keep that in mind. Some of the don'ts and conversation tips are, don't be impatient. Everyone needs sometimes time and they have a different way of speaking. So being patient is important here. Also, don't argue, we know that. Don't create false hope, especially if they have a physical condition or health situation that may not be easily rectified. So you want to be optimistic, but you don't want to create false hope either. Now, obviously, you want you to be honest, so no dishonesty or being artificial or fake. People read through that really quickly. Don't be judgmental, we're not here to judge others. We're here to be with them and be in presence with them and support them. If there's ways that you need support, then reach out to us as well. We do have a support group that we offer every year. So for people who are visiting and doing this type of work, we actually ask you to convene with us again at the end of the year and reflect on your experiences and share any challenges or ideas that you have. Don't whisper to others. So if someone is there in their personal space or around, don't whisper to them. If it's a caregiver or personnel from the medical health side, you're speaking there and being with that person. You don't want to be distracted with anyone else. And don't talk in front of them as if they weren't there. That's obviously key in common sense. Don't discuss your own troubles. Obviously, we all have issues sometimes, right? We want to move on to the positive and be there for that person. So we want to focus on the good. Don't question them about their illness. If they disclose it to you, that's fine, but don't ask them or probe for what they don't obviously want to offer and inform you on. And don't force the person to talk. Sometimes a short, what they call a doctor's visit, is better than a long labor visit, right? So you want to be effective and you don't want to harden the person to visiting in the future by making it a longer process. And don't speak in a natural tone of voice. I can pick up on that very quickly. Don't speak too loud, but loud enough that you think they can hear you. Please don't point out any mistakes, and don't buy gifts. And this is important. Don't buy gifts for the person you're visiting, but also don't accept gifts either, unless it's a close friend and it's someone you really know, but you don't think it'll affect their observation of you visiting them in a longer term way, because this is something important. If you're visiting someone and you're in the midst, you're starting this opportunity, you don't want to encourage someone giving you gifts because they'll associate visiting as, I need to reward you, right? And there's nothing worse than having them give away one of their heirlooms or their long-loved, memorabilia to you after your first visit, and then their child or relative, someone comes by the next day and says, hey, where's that vase you had? And they say, oh, Jerry came by and visited me yesterday and I loved it, so I just gave him the vase. So we don't want to discourage you, but we also want to say this is important to keep in mind. People may be wanting to be generous and giving you things. We politely, decline and say, thank you so much, but I'm really here to see you. And that's reward enough. Okay. And also, just so you know, we did have a talk and a training once, and a woman who was from the Indigenous community said that if you don't accept a gift from a person, it can become offensive. So just be aware of that, because there's certain cultural preferences as well that they have, that if you don't accept a present. And then ending the visit. Everyone has good days and bad days. Adjusting your visits accordingly matter. If they've had a bad day and they feel like they're not really that keen on staying, with you and being there in the visit, feel free to shorten it, right? You can always adjust. Prayer requests, you can ask, would you like me to pray for you? Is there an opportunity I can share some prayers for your intentions? Also, short welcome visits are better than long and labored visits, as we call it. And plan your next visit with them before you leave. What would you like to do next time? Did you like what we did today? Is there another way we can, help you, or is there a way I can assist you somehow? Thank them for the visit, for being there. And then after the visit, you want to take a book with you, a notepad. You can keep a journal as well, and you can evaluate yourself. How was it? Give yourself a mark out of 10, right? Is it a 9 or a 10? Did you do well? Is there some area that you would want to do things differently? Was there a topic that they raised that you thought, oh, I should not dress that again? That we should avoid. So you're going to circle that. Or is there a grandchild or a child that they like and they want to talk about, you can write that name, and that way those notes are just for you. They're confidential, and they're just for you to reflect on, to review for yourself in your own memory. And think of opportunities for enrichment, other ways that you can encourage them so that they are able to open up more and to be inspired to want to visit more with you. If you have any concerns, you can speak to any supervisor if you have a group established or if you're starting a group. Additionally, if you have further concerns or if there's a challenge that you come across, which we get sometimes, feel free to reach out to us. We love to be here for you, and this is why we're here. You can call our helpline or an office line, and we'll be more than happy to address that. And again, it's 24 hours a day, so don't feel like you're ever inconvenienced by the time, because we'll be there for you. All right, so with that, we're going to segue to Alex with the My Story and Why It Matters.
So the My Story program is, I know you're all leaving, but is actually a fundamental part of the program. So when we designed the Compassionate Community Care Visiting Program, the My Story was just one of the sessions, one of the parts of it. And then what happened is that we realized that it was really a key to the program, because what it did is it gave us an entry to visit people. Let me give you an explanation. So let's say you have a parish group and you're doing visiting, and you're contacting people who you know are in their homes and really don't have family anymore, might have some mobility issues, so they're not getting out, and they really should have a visitor. And the people on your pastoral team have told you this is someone that really could use visiting, and you contact them, and they're wondering why you would want to visit them, because some people would wonder. Well, the My Story program is the great opening. It's the great opportunity. Why? Because, what we're doing is just saying to them, well, I'd like to find out more about you. I'd like to talk to you about, your past. You're a part of the past of our community. So for instance, the Catholic Women's League in the Diocese of London, for their 100th anniversary, they did this with us. Now, it ended up being a very difficult project to do because COVID hit. And so we had all these ladies trained to speak to their older members, and their focus was not only on talking to them and visiting them, but their focus also was, for their own purposes, to ask them about their past with the Catholic Women's League. And so they ended up producing all these stories. A lot of these stories had to be then created, and a lot of that visiting had to happen by phone because COVID was going on at the same time. But so it really caused a difficulty. But you understand now that was an opening. So someone says to you, well, why would you want to come visit me? Like, they might be thinking, you've never visited me before, and you'd say, well, we're interested in your finding out more about you, your story, you're part of our community. And so it's that whole opening. So My Story is a key factor, okay? And why do a My Story? Well, a lot of this has to do with research that was done while we were putting together the program. And if you go to a nursing home, you'll often see outside the door of someone's room a little information about them. They'll have a little, sheet of paper. It's not usually that big, and it'll say that so-and-so, was married for 38 years, had 4 kids, used to be a teacher, and that kind of thing. And that's very simple. Now, when you then see that person in the room, and maybe they're, fairly, how would you say, they have mobility issues and everything, and you don't know who they are, that little information is actually helpful, because you realize that person has a past, right? They had family, they had everything else in that way. But the My Story program that we're trying to do goes deeper, because our goal is not just to have you visit them once and then talk to them. And our goal is to have you visit them lots, and then and it also allows you to, how would you say, put together a community program. So as an example, you go back and you're speaking as let's say it's a parish group, and you're going back and you're speaking to getting permission from your pastoral team, etc. And you have several people who are trained, and we can train more people who come forward after that. And they could say, well, why don't we work on this project? Because that gives us an input for visiting people who we know are not really part of our community anymore. They're much older. We start with them, we spend time with them, and then it can go from there. So what actually happened with the CWL group in the Diocese of London is they started contacting people who they knew were older, who were former leaders of their group, who might not be able to come out to any of their meetings anymore because of their health issues and everything. And before they knew it, they started getting calls from others saying, well, you talked to Helen, how come you haven't called me up? And that's what they were getting. I'd like you to call me up. I'd like to talk to you about my past. Well, then it sort of became, it started to flow from there, and it wasn't limited to that. So why are we dealing with the My Story? Well, we're dealing with issues around, when you ask someone about themselves, meaning you're talking to them about them, that helps them feel better about themselves. Because a lot of people, if they're not getting out anymore, they're not getting around anymore, they start feeling pretty low about themselves. They start questioning, well, what did I ever do in my life? What did I accomplish? There's a lot of people out there who had 3 or 4 kids, and now none of them live nearby. And they may, or maybe one of them does live nearby, but doesn't bother visiting mom. You get that sort of thing often too. So there's a lot of people who feel sort of depressed. So you're dealing with that by visiting them and talking to them. You're dealing with the issue of generativity. Everybody has that in them. They all want to say, I did something in my life. I experienced things in my life. It gives you something that you feel that I have accomplished something. It deals with someone's loneliness because you're asking them about them, you're visiting them. It's also this issue of self-awareness, self-discovery, self-esteem, right? I feel better about myself because someone's interested in me. And you can see how someone who's alone a lot might lose their personal self-esteem. It deals with the question of social isolation. Sadly, it also deals with the issue of trauma. And I'm not suggesting that when you're talking to somebody and you're going through the questions, like for instance, when you see the questions, you start looking at it, they're the very basic questions. Now, just so you know, for that Catholic Women's League group, we did create a set of questions just for them. They worked with us and they communicated, and they wanted a set of questions that fit their needs also. So we did create that. That's not hard to do. And a certain parish group or whatever might want to do the same thing. But they're dealing with basic issues. So you would ask someone, well, what about your marriage? Well, they might have had a very bad marriage. So you don't know. You don't know. And yet there might be issues, trauma, pain in their past. Now, remember, we're not talking about being psychologists or psychiatrists and trying to, deal with these kind of issues in that way. We're just trying to be a friend. And so often when someone's sharing something with you, remember, it's their private information. They may not want it even written down in any way, but at the same time, sometimes what you'll do is you just listen. You don't do anything else but listen, because you can't change what happened in the past, can you? You can't change it. You wish you could, but you can't. Sometimes people actually feel a lot better about it because of that, though. The people recalling events, feelings, key topics, this is good for them. It helps them because they're sharing their memories. And it's a form of healing. So when I say this to you, this whole thing about reminiscent therapy, we're not trying to be professionals in that or anything, but obviously what we're doing is we are touching on these things. And you're helping people deal with that. Someone might say, I have some pictures here I want to show you. And so you're talking to them about their past. You might ask them about the community they grew up in, their family, etc. They're sharing their memories. It helps them with their own memory because a lot of people have memory issues as they're getting older. It's nothing personal. Like, I can't remember anybody's name. If you come up to me and start talking to me and say, hi, Alex, please tell me who you are. I can remember a face all the time. I can never remember a name. Okay, it's just, I'm sorry. And my mom had the same thing. I was the 4th child, so I was always Paul, Chris, Mark, Alex. That was my name, Paul, Chris, Mark, Alex. Okay. It improves their cognitive function because they're going through their memories. Someone who starts losing their memory, for instance, they often will have a difficulty remembering what was for dinner last night, but they have no problem remembering what happened in the 1980s or 70s. Like they can tell you all about their past and experiences. And they've got great things to talk about, but last night's dinner, that's a hard one to remember. But that's okay. That's the way it is. They are an important person. They have an important place in our world, and that's what we're actually trying to reinforce. We're trying to make them understand that their life is important. They are important, and this is very practical. So we're not getting, and if you look through it, the questions are very practical. And someone might, things might go off from there, right? You're reviewing one's life and you're writing down one story. It has many benefits. So I must say, actually, I've talked to you a little bit with the CWL program. There's been a few others who've done my stories, etc. If it's ever to be shared, these stories, obviously you need people's permission. You'll see that's in the book also. Seniors are at a much higher risk of suicide. Now, this is something that shifted. If I were giving you such a talk 20 years ago, I would say, well, you know, the senior suicide rate is X, da, 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 da. But you know, in the last 20 years, the suicide rate for seniors 85 to 89 is the highest of any age group. And that's a shift. And you can look at the data and you'll say, boy, Canadian suicide rate, it's been going up, yes, but that elder suicide rate's been going up. And so the second highest suicide rate is in Canada is 80 to 85. Men have a much higher suicide rate also. So when you think about the legalization of euthanasia and how it affects an age group that's experiencing suicidal ideation, you can really understand now how this is a real threat to someone's life. But what we're doing is we're helping them find a purpose to live. You know, what is their purpose? What is their meaning? We're helping them establish or reestablish the meaning in their life. By participating in the My Story program, it significantly lowers depression. So I mentioned earlier about a university program. So what happened is there was this study done, and I don't have it with me, so I can just tell you the basics of it. What they did is they had a large group of students who were visiting certain nursing homes and doing a significant sort of a My Story with them. But what they did first is they went in and they sort of did a poll. They talked to these people in the nursing home. They asked them how they felt about their life, how they felt about themselves and things like that. And they got that data. And quite a few of them were depressed. Quite a few of them were, you know, they weren't feeling so great about things. And then at the end of the program, they did that again, where they went again, did the polling, asking them how they felt about themselves. And it was massively different. It was not just a little increase. Oh, that's been an improvement. That's a good thing. It was significantly improved. So they proved very clearly that not only was it a benefit to their memories, etc., it was great benefit to how they felt about themselves and lowered the depression in a significant way. Generativity. Now, I mentioned this earlier. The ability not only to care for others, but guiding the next generation. You know, we have a problem in our culture today where the current culture has basically rejected the past. Okay. Well, that's a serious problem because when you reject the past, you're also rejecting the good things from the past. You're rejecting the knowledge, the experience, the personal growth of the past, and you lose your connection to your meaning. So what happens is that you lose your foothold as you're moving forward. And that's what's happening seriously in our culture, but also in our communities. A lot of us have no idea what went on in the past. And so, you know, it's easy to say, oh, well, you know, what did they ever do? You know, generativity is important for an individual, but it's also important for a community. So being assured that one's life has meaning to others is important to an individual, being assured that our community has meaning. My story helps people to connect to the past, right? Because we're sharing our stories with others. Consider this community alone. I don't know anything about it because I'm not from here, but I'm sure that there's many things that people should be talking about. Well, we did this in the past. This is what we did, and we should be looking for what we're doing in the future for others, how we make a difference. Loneliness is a psychological state, and it leads to a risk of early death. I've mentioned that earlier in the beginning when I talked about these studies that show that people who are lonely have a much higher risk of early death. There's actually, it's actually worse than that. We often show a video. I could show you the video and the sound would work, but I mean, you wouldn't see it on the screen. There's a lot of research been done about loneliness, and they say that loneliness health-wise is equal to smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. That's how it affects your life, because it makes you so down. It's sort of, how would you say, puts you in a place where you stop being active, and leads to depression in a serious way. It affects your health significantly. My story also helps ease transitions in your life. So we all go through transitions in our life, especially as we're getting older. We have to come to grips with the fact that we can't do things like we used to do. So Kathy mentioned I do a lot of running. if I can get a time even similar to the times I was running like 3 years ago, I would be really happy. My body is shifting. I've come to understand, and for those who are younger than me, who are runners, they'll laugh at this. I've come to understand that if I could do a half marathon anywhere around 5:30, that I'm jumping for joy on. And yet, a few years ago, I did a 5-minute time, a 5-minute kilometer marathon, half marathon, I mean. I couldn't come close to that now. And I can't imagine how I did it then, but I've come to accept my transitions. Conversations also combat loneliness, okay? My story promotes and reinforces a person's place in our society. It's fundamental. And it encourages and acknowledges, the importance of what we did. You see, we're not visiting people and I know it's mentioned that you'll feel better when you visit others. It helps you feel better because you're a human being, so you have your own emotions, your own feelings, etc. But we're not doing it for that reason. We're visiting because we recognize that you as a human person have a need that's not being fulfilled, and we as a community, we need to be with you because that person needs you to be with them. So it's about the other, right? It's about the other. Reminiscing, though, is very important to the human person. And as I say, a lot of this gets lost. A lot of this also gets lost because in the past, reminiscing for a human person was much easier in a sense because, and now we're getting a little bit further back. It's, even previous to my history. I'm not that old, I'm only 55, but I'm getting to when people tended to live in community and they didn't move that much, And Kathy and I were just talking about that because we were talking about our family histories a bit, and they're mentioning, well, how there was, even in my own case, my wife's uncle was the brother of her dad, and her aunt was the sister of her mom. So, they, that's not intermarriage, but that means that, they got to know each other to the fact that the older brother was dating, that's, and that was more common then because of the fact that your communities were smaller, and so you didn't travel as much, you didn't go around as much, so it was more noticeable. That's how things happen. In the same way, your families tended to be more around you, and if your family was more around you, then you would have that reminiscing going on, wouldn't you? Self-esteem. Well, we're helping someone feel better about themselves. They're talking about their life, so they start feeling better about themselves, but it also helps them reconcile with their past. This can be very touchy. There isn't, and some things could be very difficult. Well, we know that things happen in the past to people. We know that abuse happened in the past, physical abuse, sexual abuse, things like this have happened in the past. And someone might talk about these things. But if they talk about it in a place where someone's just listening, like remember, you can't say to somebody, oh, maybe you should have done this. Well, no, you can't say anything like that to anybody because something has happened already. Sometimes all you can do is listen. Sometimes, Kathy mentioned, someone might want their hand held, or they may not be comfortable with that. Obviously, these are important issues. So if someone's uncomfortable with it, don't do it. But I mean, that might be a time when they're saying, well, this is what happened to me. Well, maybe someone does need a hug, right? You fulfill a person's psychological need. Your story is important because you are important. That's the fundamental thing that we're trying to show here. People feel that their life's meaning, purpose, or value, they're going through a difficult time in their life, they start thinking that maybe death is the answer. But if their life is important, if they are important, it's easier to say to them, no, you're important to me. You're important to me. We had the story of a young woman who was doing some visiting. I think some of you may have heard this story before. And she was visiting in a nursing home because she worked 4 days a week. So she had like the Friday off. So every Friday she went over to this local nursing home. And there was this older lady she was playing Scrabble with. And the older lady mentioned to her about euthanasia, saying, maybe that would be an option for me. And this young woman said to her, well, no, that would be a terrible idea. And the woman said, why? And she said, well, because I come here every Friday to play Scrabble with you. And if you had died by euthanasia, you wouldn't be here to play Scrabble with me, and I would miss you. And you think, well, that's pretty simple, isn't it? But actually, the woman responded by saying, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I didn't realize you felt that way. Social isolation. Well, social relationships are fundamental to the human person and how we engage with the other. Social engagement, right? Preventing isolation. Someone might be living in a nursing home and you would say, they can't be isolated. They're living in a nursing home. There's people around them, but it's not their family. It might not be their friends. They might make a friend at the nursing home. All this is true, but it's not their home, right? It's not their community. It's a place they have moved to for maybe reasons based on health, whatever. There might be many reasons why they ended up there. But the point of it is it's not their home. So they might still feel isolated and they need a friend. Validation, being validated, feel that your life has meaning. You're a special individual with a lifetime of experiences. A special individual with a lifetime of experiences. And this is what we're emphasizing with the My Story and why we do it. Trauma, I've already mentioned this. Reminiscent theory helps people to deal with their past psychological traumas. Talking about it sometimes creates a sense of peace, relief, and it can be a healing component. Later on, I'm going to talk to you about elder abuse. This is not the same issue, obviously, as trauma, because that's a past trauma. Elder abuse would be a current trauma. Nonetheless, the fact of it is being there for somebody, visiting them, showing concern, showing compassion. These are important things to do, recognizing that this is a human person and these are feelings that we all experience. And the basic questions we're dealing with are what? They're the basic questions. The who was in your life, the where, your family, who you grew up with, what school you went to, the things you did, your early life, what kind of work you did, who were your childhood friends? Now, they may not be able to remember the names, but they could say, oh, yes, I had several of them. And then they start talking about, well, what did you do with your best friend? Some of these people, and it just brings up these good feelings of their childhood and things like that. And they want to see you again because they're saying, yeah, I want to participate in that program. Now, in your purposes, let's say you're in a church community, then you'd go to talk to them later about, well, what kind of things were done in your community? What parish did you grow up in? What was that like at that time? Tell me about that. And they would start talking about it, things they were involved in, things that they did. Maybe maybe when they were younger, they weren't overly into their faith community as an example, but then later they became more involved in their faith community. Maybe they talk about that. Maybe when they got married, they converted, things like this. It's all different stories that people have and experiences that people have. But the biggest thing to me about all this, we have lots of people in our communities who used to be active in our communities, who are now older, who have mobility issues, health issues. They might be emotionally upset. Maybe something happened to them in the past and they feel they don't want to be there anymore. And then you call them up and you start talking to them and you know that they were on this list of people that could be visited and they're reintegrated in your community. And then they're an important part of your community. Now, why is this so important? Because down the line, when they're actually possibly thinking about euthanasia or assisted suicide, if you're their friend, they will talk to you. So let's get down to why is Alex Schadenberg so concerned with visiting? Because I recognize there's a lot of people in this situation, and some of them we've even lost. We don't even know who they are anymore. Actually, the Catholic Women's League, they're really good at keeping lists, actually, so they tend to know who was in their group in the past. But I mean, there's a lot of people, we don't even know who they are anymore. And suddenly, you're visiting so-and-so and they'll say, well, yeah, there used to be Mrs. So-and-so was involved in this and that. And you start thinking, I wonder if she's still alive. You start reintegrating people. And I shouldn't say that, but I mean, we are human. So there's just a reality to this. I'm not suggesting, I'm not attacking anybody. I'm just saying there's a reality to all this. But we reach out to others and it's important for them, it's important for us, but then you become their friend. Because here's the thing, we recently had that call from this woman, did you mention that call earlier? And so she contacted, this friend of this woman contacted us. This woman was approved for euthanasia. She was approved for MAID. This woman contacts us, she knows this lady well, and she's wanting to talk to her. How am I gonna talk to her? How are we gonna move her from wanting this, she's already been approved, to saying that's not for me? And so we had that discussion and I said to her, well, you are the friend of this person, I'm not. I don't know this lady, you know her. So you need to be a friend. And I made it very clear to her two things. I said, you need to first be honest about what we're talking about here, straightforward, but compassionate and caring. Like, we're not judging, we're not harsh, but we say what it is. If you're gonna talk around and not actually say what it is, then you're not gonna be effective. I'm sorry, you have to tell them. Well, you realize, of course, you're asking this person to kill you, this doctor. You're asking the doctor to kill you. That's what you're doing. You realize that, of course you do. But you do so in such a way that you're trying to actually be compassionate at the same time. You have your relationships. You're not trying to sever your relationship. You're trying to say to the person, I hear you have these problems. I understand that. I understand you're saying, I'm not sure, my housing is a problem. I've got some financial issues going on. I just, I've got my health problem, which is serious. And they see this as their way out, right? This is the way out. And the answer is, well, no, we can help you with that and that and that. You don't need to do this. It's not necessary. But as a friend, they might listen to you. But as someone like Alex, if I don't know you, why would they listen to me? When people call the helpline, what Kathy and I always do is we try and listen. We try and create a bit of a relationship with the person too. So you ask a few questions. You can't judge them in any way. You want to find out about them. You're interested in them. You show genuine interest in them. You're trying to create that connection. Because once you created a connection, at least you've got some way to segue to this is not necessary and we can do this, or have you tried, is this, you're moving away from that issue of death is what I'm seeking, right? And the My Story is fundamental for getting to know people and bringing them back into our communities, making them part of the community. They may not even be on, if you're in a Catholic community, they may not even be on your communion list. Some of them will be. And so we have to reintegrate them into our faith life. My latest newsletter, I have copies of it here. So if you don't get my newsletter from Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, I have some here, so you can grab them. I think the Caring Not Killing pamphlet is excellent. We have the Fatal Flaws film, which is an excellent film to show in communities. It's $20. If they don't have a DVD, I can email them a link because there's an online link to this. But for $20, it's an excellent thing to be showing in a church community. And it's only $20, it won't bankrupt you. My brand new pamphlet that just came out like a few weeks ago is called Canada's MAID Program Has Gone Mad. And it tells all these different stories. You should grab one and take them because it's a good thing to show people who may be talking about this in a positive way and say, well, what are you saying? Don't you think it's gone a little crazy? And they'd say, what do you mean? And you start going through these stories with them. It's very effective. The pamphlets are here. They're free. Also, I do have some power of attorney documents, but I'm going to mention that later on during the session on advocacy. So yeah, the power of attorney document for personal care. You should have a power of attorney for personal care document that protects your life. And I do have some here. I do charge $10 for it, even though it's just a sheet of paper. But if you went to your lawyer, it costs you a heck of a lot more than that. And we're going to get started.
Hi, Alex. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for that first 3 sessions. So we're going to continue on. I'll just put this out as well, maybe. So today we're going to speak now, coming back from break, about communicating with people with disabilities. And this is very close to home for me, especially because I happen to live with my husband, who happens to have a disability, and he's has difficulty seeing. He's been declared legally blind. So it is something that's important to address. How do we communicate with persons with disabilities? Okay. So in terms of communicating, we don't want to make decisions for others. And this is important. Why? Because oftentimes when a person has a disability, this is an important point, especially we talked with Alex once about, that if a person has a disability, they have noticed this, that sometimes other people will not look at them directly. And this I've seen with my husband, even with others as well. And it's sad because, we need to speak to people directly, address them directly, and speak directly to them. And oftentimes we find people may avoid his eyes or avoid looking at him, and it's a bit of a dismissive act. And it's subliminal maybe, and it's subjective, but people can feel it, and I've noticed it even. So I encourage you, everyone here and those who are online, to look directly at the person if you are encountering someone who has a disability. Don't make decisions for them, obviously. They are their own person. They've lived their whole lives. And if they haven't asked you to make a decision or to act on their behalf, don't feel the need to do so. Speaking directly to them, again, is key here. It is important because you're speaking to them, not to their companion or to their aide or to anyone who's a sign language interpreter, if you happen or they happen to have one. You definitely want to avoid any negative words. So for example, disempowering words, and we had a discussion during the break with someone here, that if they're, we don't want to address them as, for example, a victim or sufferer, right? Because certain things they will find within their capacity deliberating. Although they may be limited, there are certain ways that they are empowered, and we don't want to limit that. We definitely want to be sensitive about physical contact, and this is key because when you are interacting with someone, sometimes they need a hug, sometimes they don't want that at all. That's the last thing. They have an aversion to it. Some people have been abused perhaps in their past, so any type of fast moment or movement towards them might put them on, make it uneasy and uncomfortable for them, and it's unwelcome. So we don't want to trigger them as well. A quiet, more peaceful, calm environment is always better than a rushed, loud, and bold environment. So definitely ask to lower the volume if you are in a place where there's anything in the background. And the general rule is to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So treat them the same way as you expect to be treated. Same sympathy, same consideration. We definitely want you also to know this. So when you're speaking to someone with autism, things to avoid are, for example, sometimes the use of humor, like sarcasm, may not be appreciated because they may not understand it. They may not capture certain words that you're saying and you think it's hilarious, but they think it's not. They don't make the connection. Certain figures of speech as well, you may want to avoid, okay? Also using simple, short sentences is more effective with closed questions. So would you like some tea? Yes or no? Would you like a jacket? Yes or no? Would you like some help with that? Those are simple fragmented statements that you can use that will help ascertain whether the person understands and also what they want in return. Close-ended questions, of course, are very effective, so we encourage you to use that. Then lengthy, descriptive, softy, butterly language, right? Be aware of your body language. So sometimes body language is not well understood. Certain cultures also have a preference in terms of body language. We want to look past that and just be very approachable with the person you're with. So encourage them and also don't be dismissive. So if you're closed off like this, or you're kind of keeping your head down or you're looking distracted, they'll notice that. So you want to be opened up, you want to be receptive to them and be open. Use words that are flexible. So we rather someone say may versus not. The reason we say that is because they're flexible. We may not go outside versus we will. And so it's important to be flexible because sometimes people will take offense if you say, we're not going outside today. Well, why not? It creates an aggressive response or a persistent, wonder why can't we do that? So also another point here is that if you have a person who has had a stroke, sometimes they may exhibit signs as if they were a person with autism. So just to be aware of that, because it is something that may come up in the future, and you want to always regard and treat the person as an adult, not a child, always. And that's obviously common sense, but it's just a good reminder to have as well. If a person happens to have a chronic medical condition, often you may not know of this, and you may not necessarily need to know. You don't need to necessarily communicate any differently. But if a person happens to be showing signs of distress or being unwell, we encourage you to stay calm. You're going to create that environment, that sense of stability and support just by being there. So use an unhurried tone. Ask if there's anything they need. And if you need extra help, go to someone that you know is there that can support them. access a support person, PSW, a nurse, a doctor, someone on the medical team that you can know that will help and assist them. And always tell the person what you're doing first, because you don't want them to feel that you're abandoning them or they're concerned that you're working against something. Okay. With a person who has a hearing difficulty, you want to let them know if you're having trouble to understand them. And why? Because you can change that. You can lower or increase your tone of voice. Sometimes when we do these presentations, if you're using a microphone, the person actually might not hear as well. One, the tone may resonate. There's a bit of an echo. There could be that little dinging sound. They could have tinnitus. They could have an issue with their hearing aid. Sometimes people need to change the batteries, right? And so I've had an appointment once with someone where they were kind of quickly looking around to find their batteries, and they were evaluating someone I was representing and I was advocating for, and this is the physician looking for his hearing aid batteries. So I was looking through all the drawers, and he was really distressed because he's like, I can't hear you, and I got 2 more minutes with this hearing aid until I lose you. So it's important to keep that in mind. And then if you need to, you can help, assist in any way, rephrasing the sentences. Ask them if they have an interpreter, maintain eye contact with that person directly. Let them know if you're having trouble. You can use a pad of paper, you can write it down, you can show an image on your phone or draw an image. Alex sometimes mentions this, that he has a cousin who's deaf. And so that person will often wear or carry a pad of paper, white paper, and draw things, write things out so that people know what they're saying. And it's important. Often you need to maybe rephrase certain things. So I prefer if we stay indoors today, or would you agree that we could stay indoors instead of going out because of the cold? Just certain ways you can rephrase things and then see if that is understood. So also when you're talking, please face the person. So if you happen to be behind you, there's a light source, maybe move away from the light source so they can see you better. Also, maybe things that might be in front of your face, it will prevent them from reading your lips. So if a mask is on you or a scarf or something that you're covering your mouth with, you may want to take that away because it might distract them and not be able to hear and read your lips effectively. And move away from a light source if it happens to be behind you. And always speak clearly, because it's important for them to understand you, and they're going to know by hearing you. My father, for example, he can be hard of hearing. He's just recently suffered some hearing loss. And so when we speak to him, we have to speak really loud and much more louder than most people are used to and their understanding. But it's something we do just to make sure he can hear us, or else he's out of the conversation. He won't know what's going on, and he appreciates it when you speak louder and into the right ear. So there's one ear that hears better, you ask them, okay, which ear do you prefer? Okay, then that's where I'm going to direct my speech to. For persons with learning disabilities, use short, clear, and direct sentences. This is easy enough to know. You can add, certain things that you want to know, but you definitely want to have this in the back of your mind, because sometimes older people may have an acquired learning disability. And if that's the case, you may see that they don't quite catch on what you're saying. So it's important to note this and to know how to adjust accordingly. For these examples, you can actually bring a book or pamphlet, something that you think will benefit them, and you can show it to them so they'll know what you're referring to. So these are great aids to have, visual aids for persons with learning disabilities. You can also have diagrams or pictures. You can bring an iPad, or if you have an iPad, because it's larger, you can magnify the image so they can see more clearly what you're referring to. Or you can bring your phone if you don't have something like that, if you can access a smart device, so you can bring up images so they know exactly what you're referring to. Always provide an opportunity to answer questions. So whenever they have a question, feel free to answer that. It's very helpful because they'll ask you along the way, so you can reflect on what they're saying and respond. With someone who has a mental illness, often you will not know that they have a mental illness, and you won't need to communicate any differently. But perhaps if they show signs of this agitation, anxiety, panic, fear, disorientation, or aggressiveness, you may also have to need to respond with calm, keep your voice unhurried, and make time to allow the person to talk. You want to be empathetic, so you show them that you care. They may be going through something, and that's their reality, but accept that their reality is their own reality. It's not necessarily your reality. So you don't have to, agree with what's being said, but you can say, I understand that you are feeling this way, okay? So frustrated, anxious, upset, whatever it is. Accept that the hallucinations and delusions are real for the person with the disability, but don't pretend they're real to you. We recently had this encounter where we went into a call with a man who wanted an advocate to reflect on some documents. And so we came and, sometimes because he has early onset dementia, he will see things in the periphery, and he'll see like an animal or something there. And he'll say, I see an animal in the right corner. And his brother will say, that's not real. He knows, okay, got it, it's good, we'll move on, And it's something that's good because they have that arrangement that they can correct his condition just immediately by him sharing what he's seeing. If you don't have that established, then just be aware that this can happen for some people, and just to understand how to react in a calm, relaxed, unhurried tone. And using short, clear sentences again is key here. If you need to, feel free to access support, get someone else to come and help you, and then, go from there. And always tell them what you're doing again, because you don't want them to feel like you're going beyond their permission. If you are working with someone or you're speaking to someone with mobility issue, people may have different needs related to their mobility and what they're able to do in their capacity. They may have a walker. For example, someone in my family has a walker they've recently started to use. And so they're adjusting to the walker, and we're adjusting to them working with the walker. So oftentimes we'll have to stand up and help them, assist them over to the walker, ensure they're fine, that they have nothing on their feet that they'll slip on. It's important to keep these things in mind, and just not to be fast and more assertive, but just calmly allow them to do what they need to do. People may have, for example, a wheelchair that they use. Again, we want to refer to them as a person who uses a wheelchair, not confined to a wheelchair or wheelchair bound. This is important. You want to refer to the wheelchair in a positive manner, okay? I know the wheelchair is what enables the person to get around and participate in society. It's liberating, it's not confining. So we definitely want to encourage them, be positive around that wheelchair. Be like, that's a fantastic tool that you can use. Let's go and use it, right? When talking to a person using a wheelchair, you can grab your own chair and sit at their level. So that way you're at equal level with them. If that's not possible, stand at a slight distance so that they're not straining with their neck to make eye contact with you. Be aware of their reach limits. So if you see someone struggling and you see them looking over there at something like a clock and they want to take it off the shelf, ask them, can I reach over and get that for you? Just ask them first, it's important. And don't ever push or touch a person's wheelchair without their permission. It is their personal space, and so we don't want to presume that we can go ahead and touch anything that's theirs without their permission. And so with someone who happens to have a speech difficulty, don't assume that they can't understand you. It might be difficult for them to make out what they want to say, but also they might feel rushed because it's an appointment. They feel they're being hurried. So just be patient. Let them take their time. Don't interpret or finish the person's sentences. Ask questions so that they will require short answers. Like, would you like a cookie? Would you like me to pass you the chair? Just simple things that will allow them to understand and appreciate what you're saying. Ask them to repeat themselves if you don't understand them, and don't pretend to understand if you don't, okay? They'll understand, and they want you to be open and honest with them. Give them your full attention. So if they are there and they, are distracted by something, or they feel that you're distracted by something, phone, or you're looking at it, please put that away so that they don't feel the need to have to hurry things along, because they know that your attention is on them. Be attentive, and it's important to, after, if let's say you are trying to communicate and you can't still understand them, ask them to write it down or suggest another way of facilitating communication. And this is important because you have to be open to different ways of communicating with a person. Okay. With someone who has a visual difficulty, you want to, if it's your first meeting or encounter, when you come into a space, you want to identify yourself. So, hi, I'm Kathy Acosta. I'm here to meet with Jerry. And you look around, you see where they are. If they're beside the person, that's great, and say you don't want to interrupt, but you love to start your visit whenever you're available. And you want to make physical contact with that person. If they happen to have a guide dog, walk on the opposite side of the dog. So we recently had an event in a big venue, hundreds of people, and I happened to be walking a lady who was the keynote speaker's wife. And so I had to move her from this busy room of hundreds of people from one end to across the other end. And she had a guide dog. She was blind as well. And so what happened was the dog would stop along the way. If there was something that they found was a threat. There was also a moment where there was a staircase and we had to go downstairs. The dog wouldn't move. So she knew she couldn't get around it. She had to wait. We had to clear out more people, and then we could proceed to go down the stairs. So you don't want to distract the dog. Try not to pet the dog. Don't be in the way of the dog's interactions with the environment, because the dog is there to service the person, not for us. So it's important to keep in mind. The dog is also working and needs to concentrate. So it's important to keep that in mind, okay? And as you're walking, feel free, if you have a person that you're with that has a visual difficulty, describe the settings. Oftentimes when I go out with my husband, I will go out and we'll say, oh, look at that over there, there's a lighthouse in the distance, because I know he may not be able to see that. And so it is nice for them to know, oh, look at that. And then he can address it to someone else. It's a nice way to bring them into the setting. And by describing it, you're noting also any obstacles. If there happens to be, for example, stairs going up or down, or a big crack in the sidewalk, you can address that, and they will appreciate knowing that as well. Describe what you're doing always as well. And you want to give specific directions. If someone's ever asking you, where did you leave that item? Oh, I left it right under the microwave in that blue drawer, or in the white cabinet, or whatever it is. And so you want to give things that are necessarily not visual as well. So for example, if they're eating and if there's a garnish on their plate, you could say, there's a piece of garnish at 12 o'clock. So they know and they're aware of it, depending on their visual abilities, what they can understand is there. Also give specific information. So if you happen to leave a person who is blind, inform them that you're leaving and ask if they need anything before you leave. Sometimes it's helpful for some people to review something with you. Let's say they got a letter in the mail, or they got an email and they can't open it, or they need some access to something. Maybe you can help them facilitate that. And all you're doing is helping to encourage them to read something to help them, assist them in their way. A person who has low vision may need written material printed in large print. So it's a larger size. Some people can see very small characters. Other people need it to be magnified for 500%. So this is something to keep in mind, that just because you think it's large print doesn't mean it's accessible or visually able to be seen by that person. Also, it may actually be easiest for people with low vision to read bold white letters on a black background. But if that's not possible, then obviously the regular customary white background with black letters can apply, but just ensure that you print things in a big font so that they can actually see it, and they'll appreciate that. And as people age, their vision changes, so it may deteriorate over time. So for example, with his condition, you have early onset macular degeneration. So that's something that happens for elderly people usually, but in his case, it happened early in life. So with that in mind, some people might lose their peripheral vision, other people, their central core vision. So it just depends on how it's infected. And so with that, we're going to segue into our next segment, and that is advocacy at the doctor's office. Thank you, Alex.
So advocacy was also an important part of our program from the beginning, but we've actually also developed a patient advocacy program because we realized that advocacy was something that not everybody has what you would call the essential skills for, but some people can do very well. Most of the people who have taken our advocacy training program now I'm not offering that training program, I'm just gonna go the overview. Most people have taken that have been involved with advocacy for parents or family, friends type thing. They've been involved with that already and they wanted to have more skills. But for instance, if you're visiting somebody and you realize that they have certain health problems and you're talking to them and you start recognizing that they seem to be hitting against a wall at getting maybe the care that they need or certain care that they need, maybe they need a patient advocate. Maybe they need someone who's going to help them get that. And that's what the whole concept of advocacy is about. So I'm not suggesting when you're visiting people that you will become an advocate, but we recognize that you might identify that this person needs an advocate and you might have those skills and you might be doing some advocacy for that person. And that's what you might end up doing. So anyway, the fact of it is this is information about it. People need an advocate when they have trouble stating their feelings about their physical pain or maybe psychological issues. They might be afraid to speak out. So you're talking with someone who might have certain health issues and they have a difficulty speaking out to the physician, the nurse practitioner, etc., about their conditions, and therefore they need someone to help them. They may have a lack of understanding, so that let's say they're having some early dementia, they're having some issues with their mental health, etc. They're having some issues and they're having a hard time explaining their needs. So maybe they're not receiving all the the medical care or the help that they need. They would need an advocate to help them with that. Or maybe they're just too ill to speak up. There are some people who become very ill and they have a difficult time speaking up. So you'll be visiting with someone and you're wondering why they went to the doctor and they had certain serious issues, which might have even been quite treatable, and yet they came back with pain medication. Maybe they didn't explain it well. Maybe the doctor didn't understand. This is a person who might need an advocate. What does an advocate do? Well, an advocate supports a person and they try and help that person. So what you're doing when you're advocating for somebody is you're helping them achieve what they need. So what are you doing? You're standing up for their rights, right? You're speaking. Remember, you're speaking not necessarily for someone, but to help that person, right? Because remember, this is someone who is competent. They're not incompetent. They are competent. They are capable of making decisions for themselves, but clearly they need someone to help them. You're helping them obtain and maintain opportunities. You're helping them gain access to supports and services and to talk with their healthcare providers. My son, Peter, is autistic, and my wife Susan, his mother, has been you would say has been like the advocate for Peter all these years. And I'm not 100% sure how things are in British Columbia, but I can tell you in Ontario, if you're a person with a disability, and let's say you have certain, difficult issues communicating like Peter would have, I don't know how they get their disability needs fulfilled because, as Susan would say, it's very difficult going through all the processes that you have to go through to be in the first place, to be approved for things, and second place, to obtain certain services, all these different things, filling out the paperwork, all this stuff is, communicating this stuff, it's not an easy thing to do. And yet, if you think about people with disabilities, it should be an easy thing to do because they have certain needs, or there should be someone who does it for them. Now, they sort of have that service, but they really, anyway, you know what I'm getting to. There's a lot of barriers to access. I'll give you another comment. I know it's going to come up again later. Your person you're visiting, and you've agreed to be an advocate, let's say, so you have an advocacy agreement in place. That's in the booklet also. It's in your booklet, but it's also in our patient advocacy program, and an advocacy agreement form that you're going to do this for someone and you're legally entitled to do this for someone. But often if you're going to the doctor and someone has a need for, let's say, that there should be a bit of home care, right? You know, they need someone to come in a couple of days a week to do a little bit of things for them. Those services do exist, but you know, remember the doctor is the gatekeeper to those services. Sometimes you need an advocate to help them speak up for themselves. Now, remember, everything you're doing as an advocate is completely confidential. Everything you're doing for that person, helping them with, etc., is their business, not yours. You're helping them, but it's completely confidential. You need to be a good communicator to be an advocate, because you're actually, that's what you're doing, right? You're communicating with doctors, nurse practitioners, etc. You need to be willing to ask questions. If you can't ask questions, you won't get answers. You need to be a good listener. So here you have to be a communicator and a listener. Now those are two things that don't always go together, but you need to have both. You need to be courteous and respectful. So a lot of the calls that Compassionate Community Care gets on the 1-800 line are calls about medical treatment questions. So the doctor has said, you know, I'm suggesting A, B, and C, and or a nurse practitioner, or whoever has suggested something, and the family's not comfortable with that. And they're starting to ask, they want to have some clarification, and they're asking about certain things, especially as someone's approaching later stages as they're approaching death. And there might be this whole question of should there be treatment, should there not be treatment? There's lots of different things. And I always emphasize, first of all, the first question we always ask that person is, who is the power of attorney? Who is the person who has the right to make medical decisions for mom or dad? That's the first thing. So we do have a power of attorney document, an advocate, an advance directive document, which is legal in British Columbia. That's the first question. But the second thing is I always say, you need to ask questions, you need to be assertive, but you need to be very courteous and respectful, sometimes painfully so, because the person you're dealing with, the doctor, nurse practitioner, they might have some experience of people who are overly assertive and overly pushy and overly difficult, and they may really push back on you. So you need to be very courteous and respectful. Sometimes I always say, sometimes it'll be painful how you have to be very courteous and respectful, because you don't want to be the person who's actually closing the doors. You want to be the person who's opening the doors. And it's not always easy. You might think, don't you understand what I'm saying? Now, they may understand what you're saying, or maybe they have other things going on in their life. So it's just a reality. It's called human reality. When you're talking about being an advocate, what are you doing? You're discussing expectations with them. So let's say they have medical issues. You're going to discuss their expectations. You have to have these conversations with the person so you can be an effective advocate. You have to be willing and comfortable to do advocacy. Not everybody is. You need written permission. We have the form in here so you complete the patient advocacy agreement. If you go to a doctor's office with somebody and they're not your relative, like if you go with your mom or your brother or somebody, well, you know, there's not going to be a lot of confusion as to why you're there. But if you're going with somebody else, they're going to be wondering, well, who are you? You know, what do you come here for? Why should you be in on this meeting? So you have the patient advocacy agreement in place. Okay. The advocate, what does the advocate do? It talks with the person ahead of time. They support them and they act on their behalf according to their instructions. Because remember, you're dealing with someone who's competent. They're not incompetent. They are competent. You're helping them, but they are capable of making decisions for themselves. That's different than a healthcare proxy or an advance directive. Remember, an advance directive for healthcare, that comes into place when the person has become incompetent. So ahead of time, they've appointed you to make decisions for them. So these are totally different things, right? The advocate's dealing with a competent person and helping them receive the care they need. And if you become the advance, if you've been appointed as the person to deal with the advance directive for healthcare, what's the word they use here in the BC for? Because in Ontario, we call it a power of attorney. In BC, what's the word you use? Because every province, the power of attorney, you see, yeah. So because every province uses different language in their legal documents, right? A little different. Some of them, actually, just so you know, British Columbia is different than the rest of Canada. It just is. It shouldn't be different. But if you go to Ontario, British Columbia is different. So Ontario, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, most of the Maritime provinces, the same document applies to every province, but you come to BC, you need a different document because they've got a different legal setup. They got a different way they did it. I don't know why BC thinks it has to be different. Quebec's also different. Well, you already knew that Quebec was different. Now you know BC is different. Anyway, the point of it is that the healthcare proxy, as I say, is dealing with someone who's incompetent, and they've appointed you. So now you're making decisions on their behalf with the healthcare proxy, with the advanced directive. You'll be making decisions on their behalf as if you were them. So they're trusting you to make the decisions that you would have wanted. So when I talk to people about advanced directives, don't appoint your oldest daughter or oldest son to be your advanced director for healthcare unless they share your values. Don't do that. Because everybody and their dog does this. Now my dog Rosie wouldn't do that. She's smarter than that. But anyway, when they're doing their will, they go to the lawyer to do their will. They get all their power of attorneys done at the same time. Their advanced directives done, an advanced directive for finances, healthcare, etc. And they'll say, well, you know, I'll have my oldest son will be my power of attorney will be my executor of my will and everything, but I'll have my daughter do this. And they just sort of, yeah, and they have it all signed, but they're not thinking with advanced director for healthcare, you have to appoint someone who shares your values because you're giving them power over your medical decisions and they may not agree with you at all. And so suddenly you're incapable of making decisions for yourself. And so we get calls like this. Got a call from a woman, not only one, we've had several, where they'll say, well, my sister is the power of attorney and mom's now in the nursing home with this and this and this. And my sister's decided on this and I think that's absolutely wrong. But I said, but your sister's been appointed, yes. Are you a COPE? No, I'm not. I said, well, as a sister, you could take her to court and to try and get that reversed, but you probably won't win. So you got to talk to your sister. You got to convince your sister because she's the one who was given the power. But you know, the fact of it is the mom should have given somebody else the power in the first place. Don't appoint a child if none of your children fit your belief system. Then you appoint the lady who you know and who you have a friendship with. You know, you appoint them because they share your values. You say, can you do this for me? I'm not saying I'm ever going to have a stroke and be incompetent, but if I were, I'd want the decisions that I would want made for me made. And you have those discussions with them ahead of time. So we do sell the document and it is worth buying. It might save your life. It's only $10. And those who are online can just email us and we're happy to send it to you online, and please send a donation. So before a visit, what do you need to do? So you're going to go to a doctor's office, someone. But what do you do before the visit? Well, you need to know the time of the day of the visit. You need to gather information. You need a list of medicines. What is the list of medications someone's taking? Why is that? Well, some people have a very long list of medications they're taking. And I don't think I'm the only one who's of the opinion that sometimes because someone might have multiple health problems, they've accumulated medications that some of them don't actually work well together. And you do see that happening where some of the medications don't work well together. So there should be a review of the medications on a regular basis, right? You inform the doctor's office of your role and be prepared if there's a delay. Now, there's never a delay at the doctor's office, is there? That would never happen. You know, when we flew by Air Canada here on a Tuesday to BC, our flight was delayed by 2.5 hours. Air Canada never has a delay, do they? It's never happened. You have to be prepared for the delay, yes. What do we need to accomplish? Well, you know, what is the person's concerns? You need to sit down with them ahead of time, right? You need to have that conversation ahead of time. What is the person's medications? What are the side effects, possible outcomes? It's possible that the person's health condition is related to the fact that they're reacting to the medications that they're receiving. Maybe they need a different dose. Maybe they need a different type of a medication for something. You don't know that unless you ask. Do they want to discuss any new symptoms they have? You won't know about new symptoms if you don't sit down and talk to the person about it. How do you talk with the doctor about sensitive issues? It's possible that the person doesn't want you there if they want to talk to the doctor about sensitive issues, but about everything else, they may be fine with you being there. You need to know that ahead of time. Your presence might be support enough. Maybe the person you're advocating for has no problem talking to the doctor, but they feel the need to have somebody who's carrying there with them. They feel that need. And you know what else happens? This is the importance of advocacy, to understand the importance of having an advocate. I always tell people when you get to be a certain age or if you get certain health conditions, you shouldn't go to the doctor without an advocate or a friend. Why? Because you're seen differently if you have a friend or family member with you. And it's not that doctors or nurses are terrible people. What it is that you're part of a significant community. You're important to people. And they notice that immediately. They notice that you have someone who really cares about you, who's with you. If that's all that person's doing is being a presence, a caring presence for you, that is of benefit to you or to that person. I mean, you keep a notebook, a journal, and you record particulars, and you keep a folder of all the written responses. But remember, this information is completely confidential. That notebook is not your notebook. Why are you doing this? Are you doing this because you want to know something about somebody's life? No, you're doing this because someone might have memory issues. They might forget something. The doctor might say, well, you need to know about A, B, and C, and they forgot about B and C. They remembered A. But you wrote down in the notebook that the doctor made comments about A, B, and C, and they have that information. You're taking the notes not for your purposes or so you can know particular information about somebody. It's to help that person. That's why you're doing it. It's completely confidential. I can't emphasize that enough. It's confidential. It's not yours. So during the visit, what do? You take notes. You respect that person's privacy. You ask questions. Don't be intimidated. Just because doctors wear white jackets and have a good education doesn't mean that you have to be intimidated. They're just people. You suggest, they provide answers. So maybe the doctor's saying, I have some concerns about this. So you ask questions and you ask them for some answers. You inquire about services. Like I said to you before, the doctor is the gatekeeper. Someone might not be properly bathing anymore. They might need help with certain things. If you don't inquire about the possible services that exist, the doctor can't provide that because no one's asking for it. He's not going to start saying, well, I think I'm going to do this, unless you're saying, I think so-and-so needs this. Ask for information sheets. I know you can go to Dr. Google, but doctors have information sheets and they're happy to share them with you. It's also important about that because like my wife used to be a librarian in a health clinic. And if you're thinking, ask doctor for information sheets, she'd say, the doctors came in all the time and got information sheets to share with the patients. That was just a normal thing. Ask for it. It helps you with information. Make follow-up appointments. So if they mention about appointments, make the follow-up appointment with them, help them do that, mark it on the calendar. Fill any prescriptions. So they're saying there's this problem, but we have something that might help. Maybe they want to change a prescription, which is fine. It's a good thing to do. Maybe the other prescription wasn't good in this situation, wasn't working out as it should, but there's another option. It's maybe less, a lower dose or a different type of a pill that does something different. Fill any prescription. Discuss the appointment with the person. As an advocate, you're invaluable because you're helping to make the world a better place for those in need. Prescriptions, I always, as I say, emphasize are very important, but discussing the appointment is important because you also want to assess, did that person think that what you did actually helped them or not? Maybe they thought, I don't really need you here in my life. I'm doing fine on my own. Well, fair enough. I'm not trying to force myself on you. It's okay. Maybe they think, oh, well, maybe I want you just to talk less next time. Okay, no problem. It's okay. Advocates code of conduct. Now, this will show you right off the bat that not everybody can be an advocate for anybody. I will practice with compassion and respect for the person with whom I work. My primary commitments are to promote the health, safety, and rights of the person. I will be transparent in my work with the person. I will maintain privacy on behalf of the person and keep confidential all activities and records. Now, it says here, unless speaking with my supervisor for advice. Let's say you're working in a church community and you're talking about a pastoral team and there's something of significant. I think even when you're going to talk to a supervisor per se, you might set up a compassionate community care group, for instance, in Vancouver, and then there'd be a supervisor overlooking it, if that were the case. But I mean, you would still ask the person permission to do that because you're talking with them, okay? You're not talking with yourself. I will guide and assist the person in medical decision-making. Because remember, these people are competent. They're not incompetent. But at no time will I make decisions about health or medical care or medical services on their behalf. I will respect the person's values and belief system as the foundation for their decision-making. Could be a problem if you guys disagree. You could be agree to be an advocate for someone because they clearly need an advocate, but because your values do not in any way connect, you'd be saying, but I don't agree with that. Now, you might feel comfortable with them because you have a personality connection, so that could be good. But if you can't agree on something like that, so fundamental, then I think that's a problem. You know what I'm saying? If your values don't fit, then you may not be able to be an advocate for them. Now, remember, as an advocate, you can suggest something to them that you think is a better idea, but they have no obligation to listen to you, do they? Elder abuse and other problems. I don't like talking about elder abuse. I say this every time. Yes?
That could be some questions before you get into elder abuse.
Yeah.
We'll have questions on this whole advocacy.
Yeah, okay. The point, if you have any questions about advocacy or anything like that, the point about being an advocate, again, is that we do have a separate advocacy training program, as you'll see. We do offer training and advocacy, so it's much deeper than I just went over. I just went over some basic stuff. It's actually, well, maybe more than basic stuff. But I'm saying to you that if you feel that you're with someone and you feel you could be effective at it, then maybe you could be an advocate. Yes, do you have a question?
If someone is making very important decisions as an advocate on behalf of the person, but they have no written consent.
If they had no written consent, I don't even know if a doctor, if you're a friend, maybe they'd let you in and the rest of it. But at a certain point, they'd say, I don't even know why you're here. Like a doctor or nurse practitioner who's got many years of experience at a certain point will say, I've had problems with a lot of patients in the past, and I'm trying to do the best for them. And here we've got someone here who doesn't even have a legal agreement in place. I would say, I think they would say that to you, I don't even know why you're here. Like if you're just visiting somebody, you're just visiting them. As an example, let's say someone's in a nursing home and you're just visiting them and you're being a friend, you're kind, they get to know you, they're happy you're coming. And because of that, of course, they might have some serious issues in their life. And you would say to them, well, why don't we talk to so-and-so to get help for you with this sort of thing? And you're making it, and they'd be willing to listen to you because you're a friend and you're kind and you're compassionate. But in the case of advocacy, now they're signing an agreement that you're going to be there, you're going to help them make decisions, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. But if you haven't actually did that, and you can't, first of all, you can't make decisions on someone else's behalf anyway. I'll tell you, there's a lot of people in nursing homes who have signed these agreements, and they've assigned their daughter to make decisions for them and things like that, and they're still competent. But the nursing home is contacting the daughter first all the time. And I think that's ridiculous. I'm sorry, you might have heard a couple, you might have met someone who this is going on. And it's actually, in my opinion, ridiculous. Because they've been infantilized, they've been treated like a child or less or so, because they signed an agreement that their daughter will be their substitute decision maker, their daughter's this, their daughter's that. But they're still competent themselves, so they should be making all decisions for themselves. Okay, it's a little bit different with a financial agreement. You can sign a financial document, which then gives the power to your daughter to make your financial decisions for you, but then you wouldn't have to be incompetent. Then your daughter would actually be making decisions for you because you've agreed to that. You've gone to a lawyer, you've signed the document. You might do that because you're saying it's getting difficult on me at this time in my life. My daughter's willing to do that, right? I have very big questions about that too, because you've actually given them a lot of power then. But with your health care and these kind of decisions, people who are competent should be respected. And I might not agree with everyone's decision, but it goes both ways. When I'm competent, I want to be able to make decisions for myself. Thank you very much. And I don't want to be railroaded into things. And I have set values that I want respected. Okay. Is there any other questions?
Just kind of couple things I just want you to just think about. Financial decisions and healthcare decisions are two separate things.
Right. That's
So power of attorney gives you the ability to make financial decisions for someone. And that's a legal document that you go to a lawyer to sign.
Yeah.
Healthcare decisions in BC, there is a list of people on their website, if you go to the government website, that they will use as a substitute decision maker if you cannot make decisions for yourself. So it's the spouse, it's children, it goes through this whole thing. If you want somebody that isn't on that list, that's a representation agreement, and that's a legal document as well.
That's right.
So it just is, when you're going, and I've just done this over the last number of years with both my parents, is sometimes it's so much information and so confusing to the person when you go to see a healthcare provider. You need somebody there with you who's hearing what they're hearing. Because it's, even when you're not, even like, right, even now with myself, if I go to see the doctor and he's telling me this, and this, and I walk out of there and my sister calls me and says, what did the doctor say? And I can remember like 2 things. The rest of the things are like, it's just so much information. So it's a really good idea for you to have these things in place, and then you can talk to other people about them when the time comes to, because you've gone through the situation. So just wanted to kind of give that information out there, because it is a little bit different in BC than it is in Ontario.
So the Ontario document is actually, in that sense, the same as the BC document. It does have a list of who would make decisions for you if you don't have a document in place, and it says spouse. So that's the same. And the difference is the legal requirements that they require in BC. The other thing is the document representation agreement also allows you to put down the kind of things you would want or not want. And you have to be careful with that. So our document is quite clear that you would want treatment that's of benefit to you. But the question of burden, if it becomes very burdensome, that's the question that the person who, remember, you're incompetent when the person you've appointed has now got the right to make those decisions for you. So in the case of Michelle, if her mother is fully competent, then her mother's making the decision, but Michelle's just being the patient advocate in this case, being with her mother. But I mean, if her mother were incompetent, then she'd have the legal right to make all those decisions, right? So obviously in the case of when something becomes very burdensome, then it becomes a question of what you would want or not want. And those are not always easy answers to those questions, because situations do differ, and there's nothing cut and dry about some of them, but there is basic principles that you would feel. Yes?
Is the decision maker there to make A, financial decision, and or B,
Okay.
healthcare?
So the question was, is the decision maker making financial decisions for healthcare? These are different documents, actually. So BC and Ontario would be the same that way, where you would sign a document for healthcare and you'd sign a document for finances, and they're different documents. Now, often families, you know, when you go to the lawyer, you're doing a will, then you're doing your representation agreements, and you're doing it all at the same time. And often the family will just appoint the oldest daughter, the oldest son, and done, it's over, and they sign the document. And they should be very careful about that, as I say, because when we're dealing with healthcare, you're giving them a lot of power over your life and death now, actually. And as I say, we haven't only had one phone call about concerns about, you know, one family member saying the treatment of mom. I'm totally disagreeing with what's happening to my mother, and I'm absolutely appalled by this. And my sister has the power to make those decisions. If we had only had one phone call like that, we would say, well, you know, it almost never happens. No, it's common that you have a clear differentiation. I can go into several stories, but I don't think we have a lot of time, but you can get it when I'm saying this to you. Some things turn out to be pretty awful when someone's deciding, I just think it's time for mom to go. So we're just going to provide nothing anymore. There's just no food, no fluids, comfort care, done. She'll be gone in 10 to 14 days, it's over. That happens. Sorry to say that happens. And then you have them calling us and you're saying, and so how long has this been going on? I think we're day 8 now. Okay, you're day 8. Well, I'm sorry to say, mom is probably dying in 2 or 3 days. Very sorry to say. And I'm sure it's been horrific, but that's probably what's happening now. And there's no time to reverse it. We could take it to court for day 1. It might be success, but by day 8, no, mom's dying. Sorry. Now, maybe it's the right decision sometimes. Maybe you're so close to death that it's the time, but then it wouldn't take 10 days. Then it usually takes 2 days or 18 hours or something, because you were so close to death anyway that it wasn't in any way the cause of death. It was just part of the natural death process. when you say, well, we can't provide any more food or fluids, this person's dying. I mean, they're literally shutting down. There's nothing morally wrong with that because you're recognizing the limits of life, right? Anyway, these are the kind of decisions people get into. We do take calls about that all the time, and we deal with those questions. And I, for instance, have gone through significant training in ethics, and so has Kathy on these questions, so we could have answers for you. And sometimes it requires medical issues to have that. We do have something else. Anyway, I think we'll move on, and then I can take further end of the presentation questions with Kathy, and there might be quite a few. So elder abuse. As I said before, I don't like talking about elder abuse. I don't think anyone likes talking about elder abuse, but it is a common problem. I'm not ever suggesting that you'll be visiting somebody. Let's say you're visiting somebody that you know, and you're recognizing signs of elder abuse. I'm not suggesting that will ever happen, but if it did happen, you can't remain silent. So we're going to talk about it because we have to talk about it. And the reality is you might actually bump into this, and then you'll be thankful that we did talk about it. Signs of abuse. Well, there's physical abuse, obviously, there's financial abuse, there's sexual abuse, etc. But you know, sores or injuries that are common, that are happening over and over again, that's a sign of abuse, right? And then the vague or implausible reasons for the injury, meaning someone who's been injured by abuse often will make a story. This happened to me, da, 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 da. Well, if you just saw them for the first time and you visited them, well, you know, that could be true. You're right. But if this is a common problem, now we're concerned with injury, you know, what actually is going on. They're not seeking care for an injury. Why aren't they contacting the doctor? Why didn't they go? You might have a situation which is quite serious and they didn't go to the doctor. Why didn't that happen? Well, often in the case of abuse, they don't go to the doctor. And the reason they don't go to the doctor is they don't want you to know that their oldest son had done something to them. They don't want you to know that. They have a messy or unclean appearance. That's especially of a concern if they tended to be a neat and tidy person. Now they're experiencing significant emotional issues and they stop taking care of themselves. They're having issues with, they feel really bad about themselves, these kind of things. Malnutrition and weight loss. Dehydration is a serious issue. Kathy mentioned earlier about issues around physical needs, etc. And she mentioned how when you get older, your body has less fluid in the body. And so therefore drugs react differently. So if someone's experiencing dehydration, that's a serious issue, okay? Very serious. They're afraid of somebody. Financial fraud, that's become huge. Sorry, it's become massive. Exploitation. And sadly, sexual abuse is certainly a sign. You know, they might, you know, you might not have any idea, and then you're doing a My Story with them, and then they say something to you about something. They're only saying it to you because they trust you. If they say it, then you must then somehow contact authorities and start doing something. You can't allow someone to be abused. Physical abuse is an act of violence that may result in pain, injury, impairment, or disease. Neglect is the failure to provide goods or services necessary for functioning or to avoid harm. So physical abuse is an action, or usually it's an action or done to someone, whereas the neglect is the lack of something that is not being done for someone, which is essential. You'll often hear stories of somebody, let's say they're in a care home and they're actually experiencing neglect. I'm not suggesting this is happening all the time in every care home, but you do hear these stories, and sadly, often they're very sad and they're actually true. Elder abuse. Back up my sign. A doctor or healthcare provider is not notified. That's a clear sign of elder abuse. Wound is smelly or dirty, meaning they actually have an infection, and they're not doing anything about it. They haven't gone to a doctor. Remember, infections, especially when you get older and you don't heal as well, infections usually don't clear up on their own, okay? Person's not done anything about it. The person has not received any medical care. You start scratching your head, why have they not received any medical care for this? Often it's related to abuse. And they don't want someone to know that it's the neighbor, it's that this person, you know, it's the person who's close in their life who's doing something to them. They might have a daughter living with them and they've done something, or they're abusing them. Most common injuries: bruises, pressure sores, and fractures. Okay. A lot of this is just information I'm giving to you. Once again, there we go. Abrasions, they're superficial injuries and they involve the outer layer of the skin, and it's caused by the movement of the skin over a rough surface. It's evident in both physical abuse and neglect. So you can see that abrasions would be common with someone who's been almost treated in a very rough way, you know, and they've experienced these abrasions, so they would be common in a certain location on their body if it's done consistently to them. Bruises happen when a blood vessel ruptures and the blood escapes into the surrounding tissue, and it may suggest also the cause of injury, right? Because obviously if you have a bruising in a certain area, that would also link it to what is the cause of injury. Not to say that that makes any difference because it's an abuse. Common location of non-accidental injuries are the face and the neck. They're very common locations. Result from tissue burns. Burns are serious. Now, thankfully, we don't hear that much about burns, but obviously, burns are very serious for older people. And the reason is because burns can lead to death. So persons over the age of 65 have double the national average of dying based on a burn. So if you're, I'm 55, it's more likely to affect me negatively than a 25-year-old. Someone who's 25 will heal quickly. But when you're 65, it's twice as likely to lead to a death. And when you're 75, a burn is 3 times as likely to lead to a death. And when you're 85, it's 4 times as likely to lead to a death. And I'm talking about serious burns, obviously, here. But the fact of it is burns are very serious because your body doesn't heal as well. And if it's abuse, it's a terrible concept that someone would abuse you by burning you, and it could be done in many ways. But the point of it is that you don't heal as quick when you get older, and it could cause death. Fractures. Fractures occur when an external force greater than the strength of the bone is applied. So, you know, someone's been, hit. Older persons are more susceptible as also a result of bone disease or injury. And when we're talking about weakness of bones, I often mention about cancer, because if you've had cancer, one of the effects of cancer, even if you recovered from cancer, one of the effects of cancer is it does make your bones less dense. It does affect you that way, and you'd be more likely to experience breaks and things like that. So obviously, you know, they try and deal with the bone density question when someone's experiencing this. Common sites would be the hip or the wrist. Elderly people are also at the risk of spontaneous fracture. So, you know, none of these things are easy questions, but obviously fractures are serious. Lacerations. So they're usually the result of a blunt force. They're characterized by the, splitting, the full thickness of the skin is split. So you've had a serious sort of a cut, or it's more than a cut, common in physical abuse, but can occur with neglect. Pressure sores. This is a serious question, pressure sores, because, pressure sores, especially in an older person, will often lead to death. And there is only one real way to deal with the pressure sore, and that's to prevent it. If you get a pressure sore, obviously you can receive antibiotics, it can heal. But when you get very old, often I'll talk about someone who's older and they've had a couple of infections, and they'll start talking about, now that they'll bring up the issue of, well, maybe your mother should go into palliative care. Well, the greater question is, why did she develop the pressure sore? And prevention means that, you have to, like someone who, let's say, doesn't move around much anymore, they have to be then moved. If you're staying in a bed or in a chair and you're not moving around, that leads to a pressure sore. So friends, I'll give you a better example. Gordon Friesen, he's the president of the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. When he was in his early 20s, he had a serious accident. So he's been, he's in his, he's 67 now. But whenever you see him during on our meetings, we've had a few Zoom meetings with him also, so people join us. They'll always notice he's always pushing himself up, right? His arms are strong. His legs don't work. His arms are strong. He's always pushing himself up. Well, what is he doing? Well, why are you always pushing yourself up? You don't have to ask. This is obvious what he's doing. He's preventing a pressure sore. That's what he's doing. He's constantly making sure that he can't stay in the same position for a long, long period of time because he knows a pressure sore can do what? It could kill him. So he knows the best way to deal with a pressure sore is to prevent it. So you see him do that all the time. I went on a trip with him and he said, I have to stop now. Gotta stop now. And then he wanted to lay down for a while. And so he wanted to get into a totally different position and lay down for a while. What is he doing? He's thinking, I can't take the chance of getting a pressure sore. So he's avoiding that, right? So let's say someone has now, they have issues with, they might have a diaper of some sort and it's not been changed. So now they're laying in their bed in this diaper for long periods of times and they're not receiving the care they need. And then a pressure sore happens. Well, that's abuse. I'm sorry, that's abuse. Now they may say, oh, there's not enough nurses. Well, okay, I understand that. I get that. Nonetheless, the fact of it is pressure sores have to be prevented. That's the treatment for a pressure sore. This is just an image that I have here for the people online, so the people here don't see it. But anyway, it shows you how pressure sores develop. It starts with an inflammation, and then you get the opening of the skin. You get that opening happening, and then it grows further, and then it can go down as far as the bone sometimes. It's not a nice thing. It could be very painful. Restraints. So restraints. I have specific beliefs about restraints. I actually. There are certain countries that have outlawed restraints. And someone would say, well, you know, I can understand limiting restraints, but outlawing restraints? I think restraints are quite abusive. That's my opinion. You can say I'm wrong. I can understand restraints. So someone, let's say they have dementia and they've become quite aggressive. Obviously the staff in a care home is going to try and say, how do we prevent, you know, anything from happening? I understand that completely. Makes total sense to me. But at the same time, does the restraint actually help with the situation? It might help in the situation that this person can't affect others. So I get that, that's important. But usually when you restrain someone, it actually makes that person worse. Their behavior becomes worse. They become frustrated and angry. Restraints are associated with injury and that lead to death often. A person should, and the booklet says a person should not be restrained in non-critical situations. You should not have, they should be monitored. So medical professionals should always monitor restraint, and restraint should not be too tight. I'm not in the belief of restraints, but nonetheless, you can understand what they're getting to. One thing, the Netherlands, I'm half Dutch, don't hold it against me. One thing the Netherlands have done right is they created this one community. So people with dementia can live in a community. And in that community, you know, so you live in a type of a house, so you have a real homey type atmosphere. There's places where you can walk and everything, but it's controlled. You just can't take off. And they can walk around, they can go places, they can live a normal life. There's some stores there and things, so they can go buy themselves a coffee. They might want to buy some, they might have an ability still to do some cooking for themselves and things like that, and they can do that. And it gives them a normal life while they are experiencing dementia that's developed to a certain point where they would need to be in a care home. So it's a controlled setting. And I sort of like that idea a lot because of the fact that there's nothing like that I've heard in Canada though. Because you still have normalized their life, right? Oh, Langley has something like that, you're saying. Well, that's very good. You know, there's a lot of Dutch people around Langley, so they probably saw what I saw in the Netherlands, and they did the same thing here. Now, that's very smart, because it's controlled in such a way, but you're treating somebody like a human being, right? Now, someone who's being treated like a human being is probably not going to get all angry in such a way, or less likely to become very angry that you're going to feel that you need to restrain them, because they're not getting all that frustration and that they're living a normal life, even though there's some limits around them. You know what I mean? And I'm glad that that exists in Langley. I don't know of any place in Ontario with that. That's better comment to make. I could be wrong. There could be something like that. That's a very good idea. Skin tears. It happens in sites like the arms or legs. Multiple tears and abrasions bring up suspicions, right? As I said, the problem with these things, you don't know if it's abuse, and you don't want to accuse somebody of something or make a big deal about something when it was just an injury, But if it's common, now you've got a problem. The thing about skin tears is they heal without scarring. Okay? Or they usually do. Malnutrition. This is often a sign of neglect. It might be related to cultural food preferences. Someone could be in a care home and they eat certain foods as part of their culture, but they're not in a care home that has, how would you say, an understanding of this culture. And the person is now older and they might have some, cognitive issues, etc. So therefore they want to eat certain foods and it's not available to them. So they're just not eating their food. Well, that should be clearly recognized. There's going to be a comment that there's not enough staff. Obviously, there's often not enough staff. We get calls from people because they're visiting their relatives every day to feed them. You might know people like that who are visiting mom every day to make sure she has her dinner. And you say they know ahead of time, it might take a couple of hours to do that. And that's a real commitment on that part. But there's improper feeding techniques and there's proper feeding techniques. When you feed someone, you have to feed them sitting up. You can't feed them laying down. And then what happens is then you feed them sort of, they're not sitting up enough and then it regurgitates into their lungs and then they get pneumonia and then they have to go to the doctor, to the hospital. And at the hospital, they start saying, well, if your mom keeps getting pneumonia, no, it's because of improper feeding techniques. We have to be careful with these things. You can't just shove food down someone's throat. But, malnutrition, though, is a serious sign of neglect. Dehydration. Dehydration's got multiple problems because, first of all, why are they dehydrated? The second thing is, what's the effect of dehydration? So the signs and symptoms of dehydration are confusion and sleepiness. So you might have someone who is in the hospital and they seem to be going down really quick. They're going down really, really quick. Or they're in a nursing home. They're new to the nursing home. Now they're going down really fast. And they seem like they're confused and everything. And then they say to you, I think your mother has dementia. And she might have some things going on. Like I can't remember your name either. But it's not the point, right? The point of it is she's got confusion and sleepiness and everything. So they say, well, we can give her a medication for that. And maybe she needed ginger ale or Mountain Dew or something. Risk factor also for dehydration. You've heard this already. Medications don't absorb the same in a body with that's dehydrated. And so let's say they need certain medications, they're having certain issues, and they don't absorb effectively now, and that affects further health problems. People with dementia may not recognize that they're being abused. They may not be able to report the abuse or talk about it. And if they can talk about it and they can report it, they may not be believed. So that's a serious problem. We should humanize people. They are human beings. They might have dementia, but they're human beings. Self-neglect. Well, self-neglect often is connected to elder abuse. Somebody who feels they lose their esteem, they lose their purpose, they've been hurt, right? They wonder what they did. It's natural because this usually happens with someone who's close to you. I was dealing with a friend of mine. I'm going to get to that later, I guess, so we'll jump back. But nonetheless, you can understand what I'm getting to. Dementia obviously can often be accompanied by mental health problems, and it makes victims far more vulnerable. They become more dependent on others. But abuse or neglect leads to depression. People become depressed. They feel their life has lost meaning. They wonder what's going on. They don't treat themselves well anymore. They're feeling down. And you can understand that. You can see that they just really become down. Alcohol abuse. Well, I guess there's an alcohol abuse problem in the whole culture. But I mean, if you're dealing with somebody who's elderly, it could be different effects. Nonetheless, 5% of older persons have alcohol abuse problems. It's more common in men than women, but I do think that's changing. And same thing with other issues. When you get older, it takes less alcohol to have the ill effect of the alcohol. Financial abuse. Well, this has become, as they say, the crime of the 21st century. It's very, very serious. I get calls all the time. I just that I'm young enough, and I would just say, I just ignore them all and I hang up on all of them. It's just, you know, and they call me, that's not necessarily a situation of abuse, though, but when they call you about duct cleaning, I always tell them I don't have a duct. You know, I don't know, because I always get the duct cleaning call, I don't know, do you get that? I don't have a duct, you know what I'm saying? These are professionals who are stealing from people. And when you hear this thing happen to someone lost thousands of dollars. I mean, you're hearing some of these stories and it's horrific. They've lost thousands of dollars. Now, remember how this happened, though. You might be thinking, how could they be so stupid? But it wasn't like that at all. What happened is they were reeled in, right? The call started and it's about something and the person's listening, you know, it might be about, oh, we're going to help you. Are you having problems with the, you know, pop-ups on your computer? That could be a, you know, I'm hearing different ways that they get into you. And then they start, well, for this $100 fee, we can fix that problem on your computer, you know? And this is the kind of thing, oh, you can fix that for me on my computer. Oh, yes, absolutely. And then they start calling it, but they reel you in before you're in it. You know you're in at 30,000. And then suddenly you might wake up, holy camoli, I've given 30,000 people, what have I done? Or someone tells you that, what are you doing? And then maybe you wake up. But the fact of it is these are professionals. And so these are not stupid people. What it is they have been abused and they were open to it because of maybe they were lonely and someone was talking to them and whatever. Maybe they had a problem and someone was saying they were going to solve that for them, whatever it is. Then you hear the next thing that happens. You notice with these financial abuses that they go through the first scheme and at a certain point it stops. And usually about a week later, they get another type of a call, totally different. It's the same company because they knew you were open. So they wait a week, 10 days, maybe a month. And then they call you about something else. They try another scheme because they knew you were open to it. And they try again to reel you in from the beginning again. And so you hear people got hit twice. You're thinking, wasn't once bad enough? Well, what it was is because these are professionals. I hate to tell you, they're trained to do this. So when you're visiting somebody and they're talking to you about, oh yeah, I got a call from Joan at 2 o'clock. So you're, who's Joan? Oh, this is a nice lady who calls me. And you start realizing, oh, maybe she's got this thing going on. And if they trust you, maybe you can say, don't do that.
And so for those of you who are interested in doing more trainings with us, we do have a patient advocacy training. That's offered routinely every 2 months, roughly or so, and we host that online. And that's why I'll just pop that over here. And for those who received, there was a book we shared with you, and it's the CWL, Her Story, but I have one copy with Michelle, so that's her copy, and for the Archdiocese. We also have a second copy, so if any of you feel compelled to do this ministry and to start a visiting program in which you want to compile and publish the stories of your community members, we'd love to have another one, especially here in the Vancouver Archdiocese. So definitely, we encourage you to take one, and or I can ship some to you, or I can send you the link and you can review it. It's a beautiful way to publish someone's life and legacy. And for those of you who are looking to volunteer, we want to encourage you to volunteer. And the main point is, do I volunteer? Yes, I do. I take my kids and myself and another group of women with moms and their children, and we go out every month and we volunteer within the community at a local independent resident living building. And so we do crafts together. It's a wonderful opportunity to share time. And then after the visit of the group, we go in and actually do individual visits with people in their homes. So it's a great opportunity for people who are interested. And that's maybe the way that you want to decide to go, is to offer a community program in your community center, if there's a senior center, or in a church, in your parish. There's so many opportunities. There's seniors teas that you could offer so that people in the community can come out and actually have a nice warm cup, some squares or cookies or whatever you decide for them. And so join the hope, join the movement, join us in this endeavor, because it is important. It's important work. And as you see, it'll touch and affect so many people's lives. We would encourage you to visit elderly in their homes, preferably. If you don't know them, then go in pairs. But if you do know them, feel free to go on your own. But encourage that social interaction. Again, having groups, card games, movie nights, socials. These are all great opportunities in your local areas. And then take seniors to fun activities. Encourage mobility, encourage communion community. Excuse me, in our home, in outside of Toronto, there's an area called Mississauga, and we actually are starting a mandatory training like this for every person who goes out in the community and delivers communion, so the Eucharist. So it's a wonderful way to facilitate not only just dropping, by to say hi and give Holy Communion, but you actually have a relationship that you start building on and make connections with those people. And it's a wonderful way to introduce that. We also encourage you develop the real friendships within the communities. So again, like that lady in her building who's, stayed downstairs in the lobby and waited for people to come through. That's a great way as well to meet people. And of course, visiting retirement residences, long-term care facilities, nursing homes. And I'm sure if you wanted to, I'm sure Michelle has many places that she can think of as well for us to reach out to, and within your own parishes and churches. What we ultimately want to do is start and form a compassion community care group of dedicated volunteers, visitors like yourselves who are here because you're here on a Saturday, which is wonderful, and to share your experiences with others, to encourage them to do the same and remind seniors that they're never alone. Everyone can make a difference, and we are here for you. So we encourage you to take books if you have not had enough. We have the manual here, which is a quilled copy. We also have the stapled copy. We still have some copies if you want extra ones, but definitely take one with you. We also have a one-pager overview of what we do, and that's a handy tool to use on top of, let's say, a community bulletin board. So if someone has a bakery or local place in the center, you can actually post that, and that will highlight our phone number, visiting program, and see who is in need of help or support. And that's a great way to also share that. We also have the business cards for CCC and EPC, and those magnets save lives. So we definitely encourage you. There was a case not long ago where a woman here actually in BC called our line because she was given the number to call from her librarian. And because the librarian thought enough when the lady announced that she had a death date set, she was scheduled for euthanasia. She said, why don't you give this group a call? And she did. And it turned out this woman hadn't had a bath, a wash of her body in over a year. She hadn't had her laundry done in over a year. So you can imagine how much that means. And she needed to place herself in a better position to encounter post-COVID what was happening to her. Her body was becoming more fragile. She had a disability already. She had been socially isolated. So she was scared to even have a bath. So we went in and actually had, not only did Alex visit with her in person and drop off some necessities of life and groceries, but we also facilitated her to get care and have a bath and have her laundry cleaned, put away and ordered for her, and give her that help and mental support. So this is all possible and within the realms of what we do. So we want to encourage you to use this line, use the magnet, use the business card, share it with others. It's 24 hours a day. It doesn't hurt. And, especially going into the holiday season, I was in Ottawa just a few weeks ago, our nation's capital. And there was a woman there who advised me that she's friends with a pharmacist who dispenses the medication that's in the lethal injection. And she said that the pharmacist reported to her that in Ottawa, they run out right around the time of the holidays. So this is the time to start visiting. This is time to start reaching out and getting out there and actually meeting with people. And we're here to support you in that. So thank you for being here and sharing your time with us and your attention. We're here. I wanted to just share also that we have a free draw to win a gift card. So after tonight, we're going to call on one person that will win, and we can email it to you or we can mail it to you. So that's great. So if you haven't entered it, feel free to fill in one of these cards. You can enter. We also have a handy elder abuse prevention pamphlet. Sorry. And this is just a one-pager folded pamphlet, outlines all the different types of elder abuse. And this is handy to put into nursing homes or even hospitals where seniors are located, or anywhere for that matter. So people know what elder abuse looks like. And it's very subtle, it's very easy, so people can get advice and support as well from the helpline, but they are aware of what the issues are. Finally, if you are interested, I mentioned to you about the petition. There is a petition to sign if you haven't already against child euthanasia. That's right. And if you are able to, we are a charity, And so we issue tax receipts for any donation. We appreciate your support. There's little donor cards as well and some envelopes. Feel free to reach out to us. And we do thank you for that. So thank you again. Any questions?
So if you start, let's say, if there's a group in your parish or the church community, and they're gonna start a visiting program like this, we can do further training. It can be done online. That's not the problem because we do regular online training. They could join that. Or someone might become a trainer in the future. They might take our training a few times and, they have the booklets. All the booklets we also send out by email to people. So therefore, if you want to do the being with, it's almost easier just to print it up with your printer and have them that way, because it just works. I think it's almost easier to have that. But we can send the booklets to you anyway if you want it, the hard copy, but we can also email it to you. And there was a question online. Do you recommend us to do visiting on a one-on-one basis or two-on? Okay, it depends on if you know somebody or not. So if you don't know the person at all, then yeah, you should go as two people, not only for the purpose of yourself, but for the purpose of the other person. You want to make sure that there are no issues, there's no problems, etc. But let's say it's it's this person you've known for years, and now you know that they can't get out anymore, and you've known them for many years. That's a totally different story because now you have a relationship with them already. It says, please send us fine. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. May I know if there are any other similar dementia living homes in BC? I don't know. That's a good question. That was a question from Jane. I don't know. The one in Langley is a good one. I didn't even know Langley existed because I'm in Ontario. Sorry to tell you, I'm in Ontario. Don't hold it against me. But I mean, it would be nice if there were more like that. And I think, like as I say, I heard about this a few years ago, and there's nice videos about what they do in the Netherlands, and so I knew about that, and I thought that made a lot of sense because they have actually almost no problems with these people because they're living a human life. They're being treated properly. They have their freedom to go around and drink their coffee and whatever and do their thing. Yet at the same time, there's a controlled environment. So I'm really glad Langley has that. That's a good project to have for others. It's a good project that we're spreading. The name of the home.
One that the Archdiocese and Providence Health is building.
Oh.
It should be starting, I think the build starts next year, it should be finished in 2 years.
Okay.
It's actually in the property right next to the pastoral center, which the Archdiocese inherited. And it'll be the same type of village.
Okay.
as what's in
So
Langley.
Michelle says that the Archdiocese of Vancouver and Providence Health are working on the same type of a setup right near the Archdiocese offices. And so that'll be opening, they say, she's saying that the build will start next year. Yeah, so that takes a while, I understand. So I don't know the name of the home in Langley.
Do you know
Maybe
the name by chance of the home?
it's anyway, it's referred to as a community village, which is the right idea. That's exactly it. So I'm glad the Archdiocese is doing that too. But these ideas need to spread because, the concept of putting people with dementia into a care home, and then you might have some problems with them because they're mixing. And so you might have a floor of people with dementia in a care home. And then they end up, like the problems can be a multiple thing because you're actually, in a sense, and I hate to say it, you're taking away the nature of their humanity by doing this. I'll give you one other comment that really comes together for me. I think the community living people had it right. So the community living concept was that people with disabilities should not be in institutions. They should be living in the community. Now, we haven't done it well, to tell you the truth. There are some excellent community living models that are working really, really well. But the fact of it is that some places it's just not done well, and that's not good either. But the fact is that having them in our communities makes far more sense. Now, here's why we shouldn't just institutionalize people. We shouldn't just be, you're taking them out of your community. You belong in your community. So therefore, you have identity in your community. When you're in your home, for instance, you have an identity in your home. You have a place. It's where you feel most comfortable. You've lived there. You have your things around you, etc. It really emphasizes the importance of your life as a human being. But when we take you out of that and we stick you somewhere else where you may not know anybody at all, and we put you in a small room, it really changes who you are as a human being. Let me give you even a better example. I live in a small town, and when we first moved to that town, we've been there 20 years now. When we first moved to that town, the lady across the street from us was around 90 years old. And I go through a whole story how my kids used to visit her and everything, and how it was so sort of really nice and everything. But the point of it is that she had been a retired teacher. She had kids, she had been married, the whole bit. But people knew her. She had a place in the community. This was her home there. She had all her things there. Everything, it wasn't a situation of someone feeling that her life had no meaning or purpose or value. She had meaning and purpose or value all around her. Everybody knew who she was, right? She was a person of significant importance. And so I have a hard time with these care homes. I'm of the opinion that we should be providing benefits to help people change their homes. Like there should be government benefits to help someone make their homes accessible as they get older so they can stay in their home longer rather than being put into a home. Okay, I can understand as you get older, it might be impossible to climb stairs. I get it. Totally understand that. But is putting somebody in a care home the answer? In certain cases, it might be the only thing you can do. I get it. Anyway, go on. Yes, please. Okay, that's what's still wanting information. So they call it a community village. You're asking the wrong person. If you Google Langley, you'll probably find, and you put a dementia community village or something, maybe it comes up. But the concept.
Oh, Langley Alzheimer's?
It's called Langley.
It's called the village.
It's called the village. It's called the village. The concept of it, I think, is correct. This is wonderful because I've been talking about this for years, that the Dutch got that one right. And but I didn't know that there was one in Canada. And now I find out there's one in Canada, and that's great. And it's got nothing to do with me. I just have been talking about the idea. Others obviously noticed the same idea, and that's fabulous.
Any other questions?
What made you fall in love with this medicine?
What made me fall in love with this work, you're saying?
It's a ministry also.
This ministry.
Passionate love.
I think that it's fundamentally something that when you get involved with helping others. Okay, so the world would think that it's terrible that I would oppose killing. And I oppose killing people, right? I am opposed to killing people. And I think that's the other thing. I could tell you something else. If you're talking about euthanasia, assisted suicide, don't get into the complicated questions about it. Don't do that. Just talk about, I oppose killing people. There's other things we can do. We don't have to, the culture is not better because we kill people. Sorry. The care is not better because we kill people. Killing people is not the answer. But nonetheless, I've been doing this for a very long time, and I recognize that as a human being, we fundamentally need to care for the other. That what's essentially missing in the culture, which existed more so in the past than today, because we were more interconnected in the past, was the being with the person, the importance of community, and we've been losing that. And when I grew up in the old part of Woodstock, Ontario. Woodstock's not a special place. It was just a place I grew up. But I was in the old part of town, and all of our neighbors, we knew them all. And most of them were much older. We had a younger family, but most of them were older. We knew them all. It was all part of a community. When my father died when I was young, the community all gathered. Everybody came. Everybody was support. Everybody was helping. Everybody was there. And that's the way it should be. Where does that exist today? It exists in some places, but not very many. The culture has shifted. I should be able to do what I want. I can make decisions I want. And guess what? Yeah, we all want autonomy, right? We all want freedom. Absolutely we do. Killing is actually not about freedom. That's a lie. When someone kills you, is that about your freedom? Like, honestly, let's think about it. That's how they sell it to us, but let's think about the concept. It's not. No, the culture is about abandonment when it kills you. But anyway, the fact of it is that the culture has changed in such a way, and that's affected us. So we have to go back and say, well, wait a second here. There's many good things in the world today, but some things we should not have allowed to change, right? Some things are fundamental, and we've lost them. Yes, ma'am.
Not sure if I remember. Okay, but one thing about the abuse for the elderly is that I noticed that this was very visual. And also, abuse where it's not visual.
Okay.
But just like emotional abuse where
Right.
someone could be overbearing or
Right.
very controlling, where the person looks very well cared for, attended to,
Right.
and actually they're very
Okay,
controlled.
so the lady brought up, but there's
So that was
also,
mentioned, but-
right, emotional abuse, psychological
Yes,
abuse, there's
yes.
controlling,
Yes.
all those things are reality, and maybe the booklet didn't go into that properly. I often tell the story that I was caregiving, well, I wasn't caregiving, I was the power of attorney for finances for a friend of mine who was experiencing significant abuse from his family, that was financial abuse. And the difficulty was, but in a sense, it was also in a way psychological abuse, but nonetheless, the problem was is that no matter what I did to try and prevent that from happening, there was no way to prevent him from being around his family because he absolutely wanted to be around his family, but they were his abusers. Not all of them. And this was a lifetime. This wasn't just, oh, it just happened because he was old and no, this had gone on for years and years and years. And so I was helping him in a very bad situation because he was a man who, at the end of his life, nearing the end of his life, had nothing. He had nothing. It was like, it was ridiculous. It was absolutely so ridiculous. But I mean, so if you're talking about psychological abuse, this is a period of problem also. The difficulty is how do we identify these things? Because if you do identify abuse or you hear about it, and it is absolute, you can't stay silent. And that's the whole point. And we're trying to give you enough overview of information that you would have some knowledge to say, I feel very uncomfortable. This person I'm visiting, it really appears that there's some abuse going on here. And there's nothing easy about this, and that's the problem. But anyway.
Yeah, and also add to that, if there is an occurrence of abuse and you've found someone that you think is showing signs of it, you can reach out to us because we have mental health supports as well. So we can refer you to someone locally that can help you navigate through that and how to get them the support locally. There's no charge to that. So we'll refer you an effective person who will, you know, counter that in their life and be able to help it and stop it. Yeah. Any other questions? There's a lady with her hand up in the right, I think. Maybe? No?
I think she's just agreed with me.
Oh, okay. Okay. Anyone? Yes?
Just to let them know there's a seniors advocate.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
That's a good
that
point.
is a government,
There's a lady,
Yep.
yes, a lady here has asked, said that there is a seniors advocate as well. And that's true, that many people will have a case manager as well and a seniors advocate from the community living programs that they have too. So it can go either way and it can happen in that capacity as well, that you have the support you need too.
Yes, so in that case, like your community, I guess this is a very large community, your community probably has this, an organized seniors advocate system. So if there was serious suspicion that you could go to that person, I think that would be, because you have to report it. And then they would investigate and they're at least professionally trained to deal with the difficult questions. Because obviously speaking, how do you deal with the difficult questions? That's not, it's not that easy. So if they're professionally trained, that would be helpful, yes.
If you like, we also have specific resources online that we did a series of talks and seminars. We invited 2 nurses for a first segment, then we had a constitutional health, human law, and human rights lawyer that joined us for a second for the legal and the financial ramifications. And then the third person was a lady from, she was a representative of the elder abuse prevention group in Ontario, but there's similar groups in every province. So if you wanted to look at that since inspired this pamphlet to be made, and that gives you some support and help as well. But they have every province has an actual network that they will help with prevention for elder abuse too. RCMP has one as well. Yes, someone just said.
Give the mic to Michelle.
So I just want to say thank you to Kathy and Alex. This was made possible from a grant from Pro-Life Sunday. So
Yes.
we do a Pro-Life Sunday collection each year in June, and grants are applied for. This was one of the grants that we had approved for that. I think that my goal in bringing this out to BC is to give you an overview, to give you some tools, and to give you the confidence to know that you can go out and do that. So if every single person in this room actually connected with one senior person, imagine what that would do as we move forward. So there's lots of opportunity, there's lots of different ways of doing it. Talk it out when you're in your CWL group or in a pair setting, just see what people might like to be interested in. One of the things that I'm listening to this, and I don't know how much you know, but we have been with the Archdiocese for the last 25 years. So I've done a lot of this work over the years, a lot of it in pro-life. But one of the things that struck me when Kathy was talking today is the word tiredness. And don't we all use that word? Like, oh, I'm just really tired, or and it's not as much about the physical tiredness, it is about the fears and the worries of life. And we all have them in whatever way that whatever place that God's put us in. But look at people who are older, they have more of them, and they are not always addressed. And I spent a lot of time caregiving for my mom and dad over the last number of years before they passed away. And really, you just saw the progression. And sometimes just to be able to sit with somebody and tell me what you're feeling, tell me what's going on. If you put words to it, it makes it less fearful. So if anything, to walk away with something like that, I think is just a great opportunity for all of us. So I want to thank Elaine, oh there she is, and her group of volunteers for helping set up all this and all the food and everything today. And because I can't do it on my own, but I'm happy to come into any of your parishes. So if you're looking for different kind of programs like this for your parishes, give me a call. Maybe we can start something up in your parish as well, because there's opportunities to do that. And if we, as people say to me all the time, what am I going to do about MAID? How can I help? This is how you do it. This is what you do. So people, we can't change the law. It's going to get worse and worse. But can we, one person at a time, tell that person that they're important and that we love them, and that we'll move on from there.
When you're in the hospital and someone asks you about MAID, just say you can't afford a MAID.
So thank you everyone online.
Can I just ask everybody to pick up their stuff and bring it to the front?
If there's any other questions,
and
feel
just
free, you can
put
reach us
maybe,
as well
I don't know,
online,
on one of the
and you can call
trolleys,
us anytime,
just to help
okay?
the volunteers
Thank
with
you.
the cleanup. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye, thank you.